Hey, good afternoon, YouTube. It's Eric. I got a special guest with me today. I'm excited to have him on the show. It's Clint Richardson. I'm a fan of Clint's work. He's done great work. His website, if you haven't seen it, I recommend everyone check it out. It's realityblogger.wordpress.com. Clint, the first I was in Clint has recently actually published an entire book for free, very graciously, and everyone can read that book on Clint's website titled "The Strawman Story." But I was first introduced to Clint's work through the documentary he did. I think it was in 2010 called "The Corporation Nation," and it was just a powerful realization. And this is the truth. Like this is if you can see my screen here, Clint. This is where I live here, the city of Thorold, Ontario. And the documentary is about how basically our entire society, has been corporatized and fictionalized into like via a system of Roman trust law, essentially. And that's why we see Roman fasci symbolism at the U.S. House of Representatives. Roman fasces are on actually the U.S. the logo for the United States administrative courts has a Roman fasces on it. The National Sheriff's Association has a Roman fasces on it. The United States Military Police has a Roman fasces on it. So it gets and I have my doc. If you can see my screen, I have my. It was Clint who actually inspired me to go out and get a Black's Law dictionary, and all the maxims of law are in Latin, the language of the Roman Empire. But you can see here, this is so every single year, and we'll go into this maybe like as we this show progress into the true nature on like the real financial positions of governments and corporations. But this is where I live here. This is just a little city of Thorold. But you see here, it's referred to as the corporation of the city of Thorold. And this is all over the place. Hidden in plain sight. As Clinton has shown, when you're driving into towns, it's even in Canada here. But when you're driving into towns, it'll say "Welcome to the Kingston Incorporated, 1876," or "Welcome to Lima, Ohio, Incorporated, 1910." And it's a very powerful, realization to have. And we'll go into this. I'll let Clint jump in here shortly, but just here in Canada, recently, our Jesuit-educated Prime Minister, devout Catholic Justin Trudeau, made a comment where he said, "I want to refer to humanity as people kind rather than mankind." And if you understand like the legal lingo of the system, you realize why leaders like Trudeau refer to that language. Because I believe it was in Webster's 1828 dictionary, people are referred to as a group of animals or a collection of animals. And just to tie it in, I appreciate your work, Clint. You're the one that actually got me looking into Webster's 1828 dictionary more. And I found that Jesuitism in Webster 1828 dictionary is actually defined as a deceit. And
Really?
the word world is defined as the Roman Empire. That's I think definition number 16, and that's a great resource. It's one of the better dictionaries I've come
Well, I
across.
think that ties to where the concordances actually say that the term 666 was a direct reference to Nero Caesar. So, in other words, the Roman Empire. That so that actually makes a lot of sense.
Oh, and actually, isn't what was it? Doesn't 666 come up again in the Social Security Act? What was it? Section six six
There was
six.
a section that I covered. It wasn't my, I didn't find it myself, but I did read it from someone else who was covering it, and yeah, it happens to be the part about children, and it's pretty scary to read. It's definitely lets you know that the mark of the beast system, if you will, is the Social Security, and that's why they're spreading, Social Security. They're trying to get everybody in the world to have Social Security. There's, I don't know, something like 150 countries now that have Social Security. We have the same Social Security as China. We're heading into this globalist uh, system, and they're tying up all these records and all these, your medical records and everything else through your Social Security number. And really, the Social Security number is everything because It's a trust. It's a it's a financial instrument that has a lifetime guarantee or warranty, and that alone is what keeps you in business or in commerce, because you're constantly in this sort of pension system that um, I don't know if I can explain it in any really tangible way, but it because you have this benefit coming to you, that benefit is what keeps you in the system. It's what gives legitimacy to most of these laws that are based around Title 42, etc., and around the 14th Amendment citizen. And if you can get that on a global level, and like I said, go to the International Social Security Administration. I think it's ISSA, and you can read all about it. Um, eh, you know, in the Bible, Nero Caesar, the mark of the beast, 666. He said, Caesar said, we must register all men, basically tax all men. But when you look up tax, it means register. In other words, name them, give them a name, and then register that name with the number. And see, the beast system, the Bible doesn't refer to a beast per se, it refers to you as being a beast of burden. And when you take that number, you are taking the mark of the beast. You're taking the mark of what is called the district. That's what the nation is. It's a district in Washington D.C., and you're taking its mark, which pulls you out of America and puts you into that system. And so you're no longer a free man, you're in a franchise called freedom, which, if you look that up, that's the legal meaning of freedom, is franchise. It's a corporate thing. And see, that's the problem, man. It's like when you were opening the show and you're talking about, hey, you're entering the corporate limits, right? The city limits or the corporate limits. And remember, all cities are municipal corporations. So if it says city limits, it's really saying corporate limits. What you're doing, those black and white sort of inverted pictures where the colors are inverted. It's like black and white, but the color is inverted. It's like you're entering into the inversion of the real thing. So if I enter into the state of California, I'm actually entering into a corporation. Because at no time am I entering the actual state, which is the people of California, because they're on private land that is not necessarily accessible to the public. What I am entering is to a federal area of Washington, D.C., called the state or the corporation, the municipal corporation of California. And in that way, you're sort of entering into the inversion, if you will, of the real thing, which is the incorporated structure. So that's why you see all these cities and the United States was incorporated. All states are incorporated. It's right there in front of you. All you have to do is read the Declaration or read the constitutions. It'll tell you when the state was incorporated. It's right there. It's in their seal, in the state seal or the city seal. Right there, it says incorporated. So you're not dealing any longer with what is real, but the inversion of real, which is a corporation or a person. And you're acting as an inversion of yourself, which is called a natural person or an individual. And so we're all basically participating in an inversion of reality, a fiction, a legal fiction. So everything's been named, incorporated, and we're dealing in this legal hell. It's not reality. It's everything is a lie. And so focusing on everything, all the details, the Federal Reserve and all the different aspects of the lie doesn't change the fact that it's one giant singular lie. And that's the part where we say I want to get out of the matrix, or I want to get out of the legal system. I don't want to be a part of it anymore. The truth is, you never really were a part of it, except that you're voluntarily acting as one of these corporations or persons. When you look up person, of course, that's what it's defined as. No man is a person, and no person is a man. But I can act as the inversion of myself, which is this corporate person. So essentially, when you're entering into these city limits, these corporate limits, you're not entering into anything tangible or real. You're entering into a district or a jurisdiction. And because we are already of the district of Caesar, because that's what Caesar means, and that's why they named the Caesarean section, right? Where they forcibly go in and extract the baby. Why would they name that after Caesar? Because you're extracting the baby and registering it. It's called a Caesarean section. So it's the same concept. They named it after Caesar because that's what the district does. It takes your child because you voluntarily inform on it and say, here, take my child. It'll be an apprentice of the states. And it will either come out of that apprenticeship and become one of the private people of the states, or it will not, and it will remain essentially in an apprentice state, in a dependent state, and that's where we're all at. We've never come out to be Americans. We've never come out in the United States here. We're stuck in the United States district, this corporation, the artificialness of the real, but we've never come out of it because they didn't design it that way. We're supposed to be educated to become good citizens of good people, I should say, of the states, which protect in a union themselves against the federal or the central government, the central bank. That's why there were militias. But see, they don't teach us that. Because then they can control us. Because then we wouldn't be creations of Congress, we'd be the creators of Congress. So the idea is to keep you in the inversion, keep you in the corporate world in all things, keep you in a municipal corporation, which is a city, a district, a county, a state, and the United States, Washington, D.C., a municipal corporation. See, if they can keep you inverted, if they can keep you in the fiction to where you believe the fiction is the reality, just like the Matrix, well, then they got you. You're enslaved. And see, the problem is, if you're in it, then you are considered to be in it voluntarily, whether that's through ignorance or knowledge. It doesn't matter. Neither one is an excuse in law, basically. In other words, it's no excuse to not know the law through either ignorance and it's no excuse to break the law if you do know it, right? And that goes for the Bible, and that goes for the legal system, which are opposed to each other. So you have no excuse. If you want to be free, you got to get out of the system that enslaves you. If you want to be enslaved, then you choose the system. And that's where we're at. We're at a point where we have to basically make a choice. See, I don't think Donald Trump's slogan, "Make America Great Again," is really accurate. What it should say is "Make Americans Americans again," because none of us are in America. We are not Americans. It is an absolute logical fallacy, a geographical fallacy, to suggest that a United States citizen is an American. America is a representation of the geography that is the private states. Washington, D.C. is foreign from all of that.
Yeah, Clint, I have on my screen here, Clint, just quickly, I have that legal decision here from the 1871 Organic Act. If the viewers can just see, if you can see my screen here too, and the viewers, this is where it's declared that, I'll just read it here quick, be it enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America in Congress assembled that all parts of the territory of the United States included within the District of Columbia be and the same is hereby created into a government by the name of the District of Columbia, by which the name is hereby constituted a body corporate for municipal purposes and may contract and be contracted with sue and be sued plead and be impleaded, have a seal and exercise all over all other powers of a municipal corporation not inconsistent with the Constitution and laws of the United States and the provisions of this act. And just quickly to your point, and that's why people gotta realize that's why the presidents are referred to as President of the United States, not President of America. It's
Sure, you're
because the
not talking about America.
United States is the name of the corporation that was created. I believe this was the Organic Act 1871. And I believe Ulysses Grant was president at the time that this act was signed. And interesting with Grant, Ulysses Grant became an honorary member of the Philademic Society at Jesuit Georgetown University, which is their powerful kind of intelligence center. It's right, but I believe it's only a couple miles from the White House. That school was created 1789, the same year that the Constitution was drafted. Um, but yeah, I just want to mention that, Clint. This is proof for the people. What you're saying, is factual.
Well, it's and this happened. This happened actually 70 years, if I'm not mistaken. 70 years before that, they did the same thing. It just wasn't so clear back then, and I got all kinds of court cases if I could find them that talk about them. What this essentially means. It means bringing international law into, which is corporate law, into the legitimate self-government of people. So taking away freedom and replacing it with a corporate franchise, right? So like McDonald's, every McDonald's is a franchise of the mother corporation. Well, every citizen is a franchise of the mother corporation, which is United States. So that's what they did. And what the courts were warning against and calling it just a blatant disrespect of the whole purpose of creating the original states or original colonies was to bring water onto the land. Both these terms being fictional notions, but when you're talking about water, right? When we use terms like I'm floating in debt, or I'm up to my, I'm drowning in debt. That doesn't mean you're actually wet. That doesn't mean you're in water. It's a reference to international law, which is the law of commerce, law of money, international trade, which is why every state is under the United States when it trades nationally, because every state is actually foreign to each other and every state is foreign to the United States. So by being in the United States, you're foreign to whatever state you live in, but you have permission to be there. You have residency. Residency is not domicile. Residency is denizenship, if you want to look up that term. It's sort of this halfway state between being legitimate and illegitimate, and it's what you were just reading. It basically created a Sestiké sort of trust, Sestikv trust, where people are in a the term death is used, or demise, which in legal, of course, means something completely. It means lease, by to hold something by to lease. If I'm holding something in demise or by demise, I'm letting it or leasing it from the real, right? And that describes everything we do, because we are, God, it's hard to. We are after death. We're after birth. Essentially, we're something that operates in the dead, and that's why we get a mortgage, a dead pledge, to be dead born. All these terms, amateurization. For God's sake, we get all these things, and we say, okay, you're going to give me a loan at interest, which is of course against the highest law. We're going to, so usury basically. And you're going to amortize it, and so I'm going to give you an amortization schedule on your mortgage. Nobody knows what that actually means. They say, well, that means a list of payments that I'm going to have to pay from here and here. No, to amortize means to make lands alien in mortmain. Okay, to destroy, to kill, or to deaden. That's what to amateurize is. It's an alienation of lands or tenements in mortmain. It reduces the property or lands to a mortmain. What is mortmain? Dead hands. A term applied to denote alienation of lands or tenements to any corporation, sole or aggregate, ecclesiastical or temporal. So, in other words, the lands become perpetually inherent in one that has dead hands. That's you. That's me. So the corporation becomes, as you say, sort of this trust. The land gets put in the trust on behalf of the trustees, which are the private people, right? Congress assembled, as you just read, is not the Congress of the United States. Congress of the United States is like a board of directors for the holding company that holds us as slaves and holds all our property in amortization, right? We think we're just signing a contract to pay a no, to amateurize is literally to reduce your property and put it in and say that you have dead hands. You're dead. That's the Sesquicuve trust in and of itself, is that you're not part of the private kingdom. You're not part of the private people, foreign from the United States. In other words, not under the United States. We are under it. We are a creation of Congress. That's what persons of the United States are. That's what citizenship of the United States is. When you're a creation of something, that is your God. You're not sovereign over it. You're not one of the people or states. You are under what the states created, states being people. Right? So that's where we're sitting. We don't realize it. We don't understand these terms. Mortification, right? If I were to tell you, what is mortification? It's where lands are said to be mortified or dead for a charitable purpose. Right? Nobody knows these things because we're not taught that. We're taught that it's just, amortization. That's just a payment schedule that I'm. No, lands become perpetually inherent in one dead hand. A corporate structure. They call themselves a charity. That's why they have to have hospitals and all these things to take care of the chattel, to take care of like any rancher or cattle farm, you have to take care of your livestock, which is what we are. So until that gets understood, and until the patriot movement understands that you have no room for patriotism because you're not an American. You're not a fucking American. I'm sorry. You're not American. You are a United States citizen. You are property because you're acting in the purpose and person or property of the United States. Until you get that, there is no point in holding up an American flag, the flag of your captor, and saying, I'm patriotic, yeah. The whole thing is insane. They've declared you civilly and spiritually dead. You're dead to them, just like cattle are dead. Right? Death, again, legal. Death is not physical death. It is spiritual death. In other words, you no longer have a connection to nature, to God. You've been sucked into the matrix, into the legal system. And you've suffered what they call a spiritual death. Okay, natural death means you actually die. But a civil death, or like a civil death would mean your civil rights are taken away, so prisoners. And then spiritual death is to take citizenship under a corporation, a false god. Right? This is what it's all about. And until we get to the point where we understand that we are under that system, we are dead, we have no rights that are inherent, which is the only rights that the Constitution actually protects. We are not a party to the Constitution. That only protects the private people or the states. We're property. And I can't stress that enough. Because until you stop acting as property, until you stop using all the financial tools, the credit, the benefits, and all the things of U.S. citizens, in other words, of property, then you will remain property. And yes, it is a voluntary choice. You only have one choice. One singular choice. God or mammon. Real God, false God. Legal, reality, nature. Law of nature, law of man. They're all the same thing. In other words, they make up each realm. There's two realms. You choose this, which means you are completely not responsible for your actions. You have no self government. You have no self control. You are completely controlled by the institutions, corporations of man. The inversion of being a son of God, or you choose to go back to nature, or you choose to be private or foreign from that. Right? There is no other choice that you have. Now, once that choice is made, which is where we all are, we're still voluntarily in that choice, everything becomes causality. You no longer have a choice. You can vote. You can say, I want candidate A or candidate B. But what you can't do, the only freedom that you actually have in nature, is to say no. You do not have the right to vote no. You do not have the right to decide for yourself to self-govern. You must accept their choice for you. And that is how you know you are a slave. If you are required to vote for something and choose the lesser of two evils, then you know you are in an evil system. You are acting in an evil persona, mask, status. You cannot escape that fact, and you are doing so voluntarily. You don't have to vote, but guess what? If you don't vote, you're still voting yes. Your vote doesn't count. If only one of us vote, someone's still gonna be president, right? So if you don't have the right to say no, which is the only right you have in nature, the right to not be harmed and to do no harm, the duty that goes with the right, then you are not free. You are not an American. You are not anything that you are supposedly patriotic about. Right? Now, with that as the foundation, right, with the understanding that we've already made the choice, and now, like when you join the military, they can beat the crap out of you. You're under a different system of law. You're contracted in, right? Once you have that, once you understand you've made that choice, and you're under that contractual agreement, social agreement, whatever you want to call it, that is a voluntary choice, and continuing in it is a voluntary action. Once you understand that, now you can understand why it feels you have no choice. Why it feels I don't have a choice. I have to have a president, so I'll vote for this one. I have to do this. I have to do this. No, you don't have to do anything unless you're plugged into the matrix, the legal matrix, unless you're acting in its corporate structure. And so what they did was they brought the international law in through corporations, like I said, the inversion of the real, and now everything you touch is water, because water represents a metaphoric term that represents the law of the sea, which is international law. You're not an American. You're not under American law. You're under United States code, commercial code, and all the different things that the lawyers, i.e. devils, create until you get out of it. And that's where you're at. You're at the point where you can make one and only one choice: to either stay or to leave the legal system. But to do that, you have to know how to self-govern. You have to understand what God is. You have to read the Bible. You have to understand all of that. Because the second you do something wrong, you're going to get sucked back in. So,
No, great information, Clinton. Just, I believe, this system of the voluntary, and this is key, and this is what the birth certificate is. Like, in Matrix, and I have a couple of terms. I have while you're talking, I was just going through some of my Black's Law 7th edition here. There's a term, I believe, I think this was one of the Red Pill Sunday shows you did with Christian Remedy and Law, Or I think he brought up this term, but this term I think it accurately describes, this serfdom status we have as chattel in the eyes of the legal system. But it's insinuare, insinuare. It comes from the Latin and the Roman and civil law, and it's to register and to deposit with the public registry. So to register and to deposit with the public registry. And that's essentially what is taking place with the drafting of the birth certificate. And this is why like there's numerous cases, it seems like there's a case every other year, unfortunately. But this is why Child Protective Services can just take a child from their parents because it's in their complete legal means to do so, right? Because the child is technically
But
legally like a bastard, right? Like he's
well,
registered with
but
the state.
why? Why can CPS come and take your child? Remember, everything goes back to the choice. The one choice you have. One choice you have, which is to be governed or to self govern under God's law, the law of nature. You have only that choice. That's the only choice that matters. Everything else is a symptom, a consequence, a causality of that initial choice. Now, obviously, we didn't. If you're birthed into a system, you don't even know it's happening. You didn't ever make the choice, but your actions are what defines your choice. You don't say, okay, I'm done. Your actions. So everything you do, every benefit you take, every time you use the name, every time you use the social security number. So these parents, what are they doing? They're using the legal name, the number. They're registering their child in public education. They're doing everything they can to put their child in the public realm. Remember, who owns the public? You think it's you? It's not. It's government. What is public domain? It's not you. It's government. So, if you're putting your child into the public domain, what do you expect to happen? Right? What possible thing can you do? This is a causality of the initial choice. Right? Once you make that choice, all your choices are taken away from you and replaced with consequences, causalities, whatever words you want to use. Causality is a good word because everything that's happening is because of the choice, the volunteerism, the slavery. Right? As you say, a feudal system. Chattel.
Oh man, people,
So,
you don't realize how had we are, like it's and like there is persecution risk. Like if you well, I guess if you have a child and you don't put him into a public school, you run the risk of militarized police, coming to your door and arresting you. And the same thing to your point when you were talking earlier, just about like the true status when you sign a mortgage or death pledge. Of, like it's basically what you're getting into. You're saying to the state, okay, like this is here. The state is saying to you, okay, you have permission to basically like license this house, but it's still state property, and that's why you have to pay the tax. And people don't pay taxes on their house. Like you'll see that like you don't actually own your house if you don't pay the fee, to the state. And just on my screen here, if you haven't, you might, I don't know if you're aware of this quote, Clint, but this was from the excerpt in Appleton's Encyclopedia of American Biography, and this was the excerpt on this Jesuit priest John Carroll John Carroll S.J. Society of Jesus. Is one of the very intriguing. This guy actually played a role like in the founding of the United States. He founded Georgetown University in 1789. His cousin Charles Carroll, who was educated by the Jesuits, was one of the two Catholic signers on the Declaration, I believe. But from this Appleton Encyclopedia, there's a quote that says, "No greater power of combined wealth, intellect, and enthusiasm existed anywhere in America than the union of the Carrolls and the Jesuits in Maryland in the person of John Carroll." And just a very interesting quote. And this Appleton's Encyclopedia also claims that Benjamin Franklin went to see the papal nuncio at Paris in 1784, and he showed him draft of the Declaration of Independence.
Well,
And it shows. I think it just shows that this is like, if you look into the history, like the Jesuits in particular and the Catholic Church, had their tentacles. Like this was the basis of Tupper Saucy's book, Rulers of Evil, that came out in 2001. They had like a genesis in the founding of America, and it's what you're saying, to bring the international Roman canon law, like the international corporate law, and to basically turn America into a feudal serfdom. Going back to the year 1492, this was covered in Aber Manhattan's book, The Vatican Billions, but Pope Alexander VI drafted a bull, Inter Carrera. This is when Christopher Columbus was sailing across the Atlantic for Spain and the Catholic Church, and like Pope Alexander VI, who was a Rodrigo Borgia, actually declared that like all of North America was papal property. And this was going back all the way to 1492, and that's why that same year the Treaty of Tordesillas was signed, which divided the entire Americas, north and south, from Antarctic to Arctic, and Portugal was given Portugal was given the eastern side of South America, and Spain the western side, and this ran up into North America. This is well before the creation of the United States, but this is why still to this day Portuguese is the main language of Brazil. So the papacy has this, and actually I have this document up here. This was a bull from Unum. The papal document was Unum Sanctum from 1302. The Pope Boniface VIII, he said, "Furthermore, we declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman Pontiff."
mhm.
And I have a collection of archives. Like the popes, numerous times have declared themselves to be none other than God Himself, and like His will is the supreme will. So when you see like on the American currency, like "In God We Trust," with like the Illuminati pyramid on top, like the Illuminati was founded by a Jesuit professor, Adam Weishaupt, a professor of Roman canon law. So when you see "In God We Trust" over the dollar bill, like what God is that referring to? Like is that because the Pope says he's God? Like
Well,
you know what I mean?
first of all, you wouldn't put Jehovah, or for that matter Jesus Christ, on a dollar bill when they're diametrically opposed to the whole money system, right? So "In God We Trust" cannot therefore be Jehovah because money is artificial. You can't assign natural concepts a Jehovah, meaning the universe or nature itself, right? The whole of the universe, or uni, meaning monotheism, basically. That is the definition of God in the Bible, and it's not used that often. Most of the time, God is a reference to men acting as kings or popes. What became the Pope? And yeah, the Pope claims to be Christ, and it touches on something you said earlier. You know, the whole purpose for the church historifying the story of Christ, as opposed to using it as an allegory for the self, right? The whole purpose behind making religion into a history is because the Pope claims to be Christ on earth, the vicar of Christ, the replacement, the anti-Christ. You see, people have the wrong idea about what is anti. Anti just means replacement, that which is instead of. And that's what the Pope claims to be. Pope claims to be, and remember, we're talking about an office. We're not talking about a man. We're talking about a corporate office, a corporation. That's what the Pope is. That's what the president is. That's what the Queen is. She's head of the Crown Corporation. Doesn't get any more plain than that, right? There is no queen. There is only a office created by the corporation called Queen, and she acts as it until she dies. And in that way, it's an immortal god, an immortal corporate structure, an immortal uh, king. Basically, the king never dies. Long live the king, right? Because the king never actually dies. Because the second the man, male or female, dies, the king is a corporate office. It's not living. It's immortal in the terms of man's legal realm, right? So what is the Pope doing? He says, well, we, you know, we claim this office because of what Peter said in one book, one chapter, which is completely taken out of context, that we should be the keeper of the flock of God, right? So the Pope claims to be the Antichrist. I mean, that's what he's claiming by saying I'm the replacement or vicar of God, and claiming the right to literally change the word of God, the Bible, the law. That's what they claim over there,
Yeah, so Clint,
right?
just to reiterate that, so like that's like legally, like that's the Protestant position on like I'm not a Protestant myself, but like I have a profound respect for the philosophy of Christ. But like the Protestant position on the papacy has been like the office of the papacy is the Antichrist, the successive
It's
popes being
it's the
elected,
inversion.
and
Remember
that's
we're
just,
talking about inversion?
and you're saying though like legally though like the Pope by calling himself like the vicar of Christ is legally like he's like that's the legal term of anti. He's inverting
Absolutely.
like the Christ. Yeah, so that's a powerful realization. Just like legally, like he's the Antichrist.
But remember, the Bible says there will be many antichrists. Right? You, me, we're all acting antichrist because Christ is the personification of the law of God, logos, right? We're not following Christ, we're worshiping Christ as an idol, which is exactly what the church wants you to do. Because the second you start acting Christ like, following the law of God, you're no longer under their power. That's why the Bible is said to be what will set you free. The truth will set you free, right? God is truth. Truth is nature. Truth is the universe, right? These things all have the same meaning when you look it up in the old language. So we've been taught through religion to worship Christ as God. I don't know how many times I hear people say Christ is God. Well, of course, because that's what the Roman church teaches, because it's antichrist. It is literally the replacement of Christ on earth, the Pope, the whole. I mean, keep in mind, the Pope is the whole corporation. He's the head of the corporation, just as the president is the head of the whole corporation, right? The prime minister, head, the queen, the king. It's all the same thing. So instead of understanding that when the Bible says your body is the temple of God, the Roman Church, well, I mean, basically Christianity, all of Christianity is an extension of the Roman Church. So you can't get away from that. Because Christianity really has nothing to do with the life of Christ, but the death. They're a death cult. That's what the Catholic Church is. They celebrate the death of Christ because without the death, there can be no replacement. Right? Christ cannot continue to exist on earth unless you historify the story of Christ,
Well, yeah, and
which is
Clint,
meant to be an allegory.
at the Vatican, Clint, I forget the name of this monument, but like the Vatican has, let me get my screen on here. But the Vatican actually has, I forget what they call this, but they have like these feet imprints engraved, and they say this is where like the historical Christ, exactly stood, 2,000 years ago. And they've hoaxed like numerous, like I was in Spain just with some family. My parents were living in Switzerland last year, and I was in Spain. We just took a day trip there, and they supposedly at this one Catholic church, I think, had the like they preserved like the remains of Christ or something along the lines like that. Like, oh, we preserved like the bones of his feet, like it's just silly stuff like that. And just showing this logo here, this is what I wanted to mention. Like this influence is profound, and realizing like as we mentioned earlier, the entire legal system is based off of Roman trust law, and that is why you see the fasces all over the world. Like going over to Europe, this actually ties into it. The Norwegian National Police has a Roman fasces on it, as well as the Swedish National Police. But it just shows that like the civil governments in the world, are basically incorporated via a system of Roman trust law. This happened in Britain in 1213 with when King John. You can actually see the photo of this on Getty Images. King John actually signed over the entire British Empire over to Pope Innocent III. And this included all like the wealth and the trusts of the British Empire. And then
Right,
this is actually
but remember, what are they talking about? Are they talking about something real? Or are they talking about a big corporation?
well, absolutely, it's a corporation, yeah. So essentially, what that is, that showed was like the British Empire is now like a artificial corporation of the mother Vatican corporation. That's what that
So essentially, this is this. You bring this back to the Bible, and what the Bible says is that the meek, a word that essentially means the spiritually prepared, those with the knowledge, those who understand the Word of God, the law of God, understand that in order for, how do I say this? There is no return of Christ. The return of Christ is when you individually start acting Christ-like, because you are the law of God. You are the only ones that can enforce it, right? You're the only ones that can act in it. The return of Christ, in other words, the return of the law of God, the return of Logos can only happen if you start acting Christ-like. Okay, this is what the Bible tries to express, but the king came in and mistranslated it purposefully, because the king calls himself God as well, right? And so does the Bible. The Bible says kings, magistrates, mayors, anybody's a god that has authority that you give to them. That's a false god. And that's why it says, take no other gods before me. So what does it say? It says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And the translation for earth, in this case, doesn't mean the world of man, it means the world of God, right? The nature. So if the meek, the spiritually prepared, will inherit the earth, what will the non-meek inherit? And the answer to that is paper. Something that is an inversion of the real, of nature, the earth. Right? The earth, I mean, for God's sake, you could say that earth, there's the real earth, and then there's the title, right? The legal title. And the Pope says, I own the title, right? I am the corporation that holds the title to earth. But earth is the real. Who's going to inherit the real? And who's going to inherit the paper? And the answer is, if you stay in the legal system, the only thing you'll ever inherit in your life will be paper, fiction, words on paper that describe the real, the inversion of the real, but are not the real. But the spiritually prepared, those who can self-govern, you see, you will inherit the earth. You will inherit the kingdom of God. That's what it's trying to tell you. You see, it's a difference between a lie and the real. And in every case, Satan and God, what of good and evil, right? It's all the same thing. There's lies and there's truth. And see, we have this thing called the truth movement, which deals in nothing but lies. The truth movement doesn't talk about anything but lies. What is a lie? Government, that's a lie. Money, that's a lie. Legal fiction, law of man, legal law, right? What else? The Federal Reserve is a lie. It's not real. They're corporations. Never is the truth movement talking about truth. Second, you mention God. God is truth in the Bible, right? Second, you mention Christ in any real sense. The second you go into truth, which is never that which is made of man or by the hands of men, not language. Language is not truth. I can speak truth, but words are never truth. Truth is only what is the tangible creation of God, nature itself, right? We never talk about the truth. But what are you going to inherit? Only the truth, because that's God's kingdom, right? Everything else is a lie. Money, how much money you have in your pocket, that's a lie. It's not your money. It can be confiscated from you at any time. It's property of government, right? So another way to put that is to talk about the inversion of the word property. Now, we just worship property. Property is everything. It's the basis of law, and it's absolutely true because the Pope wants to call you property, and so does government. So it created persons for you to inhabit. It controls the person, therefore it controls you because you're acting as the person, right? But what is property in nature? Can you answer that question? We know that property
yeah, I was
is a
saying
legal title.
the creator doesn't say that. Oh, these trees are mine. This is my. I have a financial, entitlement.
What are trees a property of?
That's a good question. That's the thing. Like
Nature.
the nature, and that's the thing. Nature doesn't claim, ownership like a state
No.
or like the Pope.
And neither should you over any part of nature. The only thing you're able to claim as property legally is a piece of paper. A piece of paper is an inversion or a representation, a simulation of what is real, but it is not real. So that's all you're ever going to inherit in the legal system is a piece of paper. The meek shall inherit the earth. Trees are a property of the earth, which is a property of the universe. God, Jehovah, right? So let's take water. What are the properties of water? H2O.
Yeah, hydrogen, oxygen.
So what is hydrogen a property of? Water. What is water a property of? See, you're using the term property in its scientific true meaning, as opposed to a legal inversion, which is always a lie. Every legal term is a lie. So you have the choice. This is that initial choice, which is to say, I am property of God or the state, man. That's the initial choice. Once you make that choice, everything else is a causality. All the legal list, the system, the law, the properties, and that's all. You're living a big giant lie because you have claimed to be property of man by acting in its person, taking its marks, taking its number, the number of Caesar, right? You've done it already. You're already in the matrix. The way out. It sounds hokey, it sounds corny, but it's what the Bible is all about, is to be born again. Now, religion will tell you, hey, have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ as we define it. No. Jesus Christ is the law of God personified. It is an example for you to follow. You are to be Christ-like. You're to be the one, right? So, how do you escape the matrix? You follow the law of God, which is listed in the Bible. And the Bible says, don't respect persons, don't respect flattering titles, don't respect lies, don't respect money, don't respect the valuation put on things in monetary terms, which is called mammon. Right? It's all there. The secret, which is no secret at all, is that you must worship truth. What is truth? God is truth. And that's Jehovah, the universe, nature is truth. The law of God, which is personified in the story of Jesus Christ, is the example you follow. If you want to get out of the legal matrix, the inversion of the real, you must go back to truth. You must be reborn as you were when you first were born into this world, which was without belief, without all the false things that we worship. You had none of that when you were born. You were a clean slate. You must go back to that. It says in the Bible, it must be like children again. Why? Because children don't believe. We think children believe in nonsense. We teach them nonsense. We teach them about Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny. But look at what they have a really hard time believing in. All the shit that we do on a daily basis, they think we're fucking insane, right? Typical child, you try to explain anything we do in society as a social construct, they think you're insane. They get embarrassed that you're talking about sex as if it's something not sacred. They get embarrassed, and it takes them what the Jesuits say: give me your child till the age of 7, and I'll give you a Jesuit. Right? A lot of different systems say that.
Oh yeah.
So as long as you can control the child, teach the child to be a Jesuit, he will always be a Jesuit. That's what we're doing to our children. We're telling them lies. We're telling them about Santa Claus, which is a satanic version of Christ. We're telling them about, it's amazing, the history of that. And then expecting them to have any kind of insight into truth, into reality. What do you expect them to become but good little citizens? Minions of hell.
Well, Clint, I noticed that kids just when they're younger, like, like they're more just like living their life, just more to the fullest, if you will. They're not worried about, oh, what are these people thinking about me? What's this system doing over here? And it's
but we're getting in the way.
And even with me, like when I went through, I became, I guess, a little more antisocial or maybe more insecure or maybe less in control, initially when I started going through school because I became subject to all these rules, outside rules and norms, rather than just living my life vicariously. And I think what you're talking about, Christ, I think what Christ, would advocate, is for everyone to take firm responsibility for God-given responsibility of your own life. You're responsible for your own actions, and it's ultimately like how we get out of this. Like we have to realize that it's our obligation to inform ourselves.
Well, think of it this way. If you had no beliefs, for instance, I have no belief that there is a president of the United States who runs an organization called United States, and through all of that, at the bottom, very bottom, lower level, is me, a person of the United States. I somehow belong to and was born into this thing. If I didn't have that belief, who would I put my responsibility on? You see, it's because we have these false beliefs in false gods and false systems of law that we have a false thing to put our responsibilities upon. Whereas in nature, that just doesn't jive. Because what does the Bible say again? Over and over and over in every chapter, do not respect persons. And that means do not respect status. Do not say that you are anything but exactly what you are, which is a man, male or female, right? Do not respect any of these things that you can put blame on, right? Don't judge others lest ye judge yourself. That's kind of where that comes from. Do not blame anything but yourself and take responsibility, self-responsibility under self-government for your actions. That is the key to everything. And that can only happen the only way that can happen is if you stop believing in these systems, persons, and things. Here's the trick, though. The king translated that word into believe. But that's not what the word was. The word was love. You can go to Webster's dictionary, look up the word leaf, as in belief, or leave, Lieve. And guess what it says? Love. Love. It's not that you have this mental belief, right? Because everybody has that. We all kind of understand the notion that we're acting as I'm an employee, or let's say I'm a soldier, therefore I can kill. Where in the Bible does it say that? I'm a soldier, therefore I have a legal license to kill? No, that's absolutely 100% what it says not to do, because you're respecting a person, a status that is not of the real. And therefore you're using that as an excuse to do a crime, one of the worst crimes possible, the 10 Commandments even. So, the whole Bible is set up as that which is opposed to the legal law. The legal law is set up only to be against the Bible, to be against the law of nature. The whole point of the Pope creating the civil law system and combining the church state was to allow the church to do some really dastardly things and be forgiven by the state. Meanwhile, the state is doing some really dastardly things and is forgiven by God, the church. You see, they're the same thing, they're not separate. There is no separation of church and state. Every constitution, every time you see something is created, every war that is fought, the excuse is always God.
Well, absolutely.
God.
With the war in Iraq, Clint, one of the Americans don't know this. One of the biggest war hawks in the Iraq War was a Catholic cardinal, Cardinal Edwin Frederick O'Brien. He was even as late as 2014. He was saying we need to keep the United States troops, here in Iraq, just to show the church and state. It's just become so engraved in American culture. Every single president in the United States will go talk at the Knights of Columbus convention. For instance, there's probably 50 photos of President George W. Bush with the Archbishop of Washington, Theodore McCarrick, for instance, and he is now actually, interestingly, a shamed pedophile, but you can see like 50 photos with him. There's the Supreme Court every single year has a red mass in honor of St. Thomas More, who is the patron saint of lawyers. So it's so in your face. Like there's no separation of church and state. Like the Roman fasces are in the U.S. House of Representatives. For the United States Army, in 1986, Pope John Paul II created the Archdiocese for the Military Services. So now there's Catholic chapels set up at all 240 U.S. military base installations all over the world. And just I have this picture up here. I don't know if this was drawn by Sir Francis Bacon. Interestingly, Sir Francis Bacon was very close with the Jesuits. He's quoted by H.G. Wells in his book Crux Ansata as saying, "I have profound respect for the Jesuit education system." But I think this photo here just profoundly illustrates the church-state system of legal domination that the Jesuits have installed. You can see the Freemasonic pillars on and this is kind of like a Freemasonic, I guess, inverted or semi-constructed Kabbalah tree, if you will, the Jesuit IHS as Qatar. But you can see right here is Grammatica. If you can see, I'll zoom in. I think this is them actually symbolizing that you see the tongue. I think that's them saying we're snatching, I guess the tongue could say, the essence. We're snatching the essence of the citizens and or the people and putting them into a legal fiction status. And you can see on the top pillar, you see Theologia and Politica. And George W. Bush, just the same Pope, he actually said in an interview with Raymond Arroyo. I don't know if you saw this, Clint. He's a Catholic news journalist at EWTN. But George W. Bush actually said he saw God in the eyes of Pope Benedict the 16th, for instance. Bill Clinton gave a speech at the Vatican in 1994. The speech was titled to a speech given by the president to American seminarians. And Bill Clinton said, "I'm thoroughly amazed to see how involved His Holiness is in the affairs of the world."
Philip K. Dick, an example of a wonderful grammarian, someone who uses language very well. Here's his quote. He says, "The basic tool for the manipulation of reality is the manipulation of words. If you can control," now listen to this carefully, "if you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use them. If you can control the meaning of words, you can control the people who must use them." Now imagine having the power to define words. Okay, that's what government has. You have that power if you start your own government, your own whatever, right? Your own art form, terms of art, that's what they call it. That you can change words, but while you're acting in the legal system, there is only one set of words that you are required to use at all times, and that's the legal language. If you think that you know the meaning of a word, and you use that word, rest assured, they are taking the Roman Latinized construct of that word. No, it doesn't matter what your intention is to speak. They're taking the words which they control and which you must use because you're their property, you're their person. So imagine having that power to say what words mean, right? That's an incredible power because whole worlds are created, legal realms are created from words. Now imagine you also have the power over the education of the common people who are going to use those words. What are you going to do? Are you going to teach them? Because you're an inherently profoundly evil son of a bitch. And your whole system is based on the extortion of people and control. Are you going to teach them the meaning of those words? Or are you going to teach them a common, dumbed down version of it that will always get them in trouble because what they mean to say is not what they're actually saying and they don't even know it? Right? See, now that is an amazing power. And that's why, if you were to take one of the lessons of the Bible, I think that is unspoken. It is that your words should always be sincere. In other words, they should never be anything but what is truth. When I say squirrel, I'm not saying that because I think a squirrel is higher or lower or anything as a status, right? I'm saying it strictly as a term of nature, a term of reality. Whereas all terms created by governments and doctors, legal language, doctor language, botanical words, all those are all artificials. They're called terms of art because they're not referring to something that is real. In other words, their terms of nature do not assign status. They do not assign power or authority, although they do have the masculine and the feminine, which signifies power and being under something. The point is that you would never use a term to manipulate or somehow turn reality or truth into something inverted, like we're talking about, something that is not truth. So when I use the word Clint, or I say my name is Clint, my Christian name is Clint, I'm saying that is the name that my parents gave me. It is a gift of God. The second I add a second name to it, a last name, which is a legal name or a family name, I've just added something that is not natural to my name. And that is where we get into trouble. The second we add things that are not natural, words or numbers or any symbol that is not of nature or that in our minds is not something of nature, it's a lie and we know it's a lie. I know my social security number did not grow on a frickin' tree, right? I know it's all a lie.
Well, and Clint, if I'm not mistaken, like when you get registered with the surname, this is now legally you're a person. And I have the Webster 1828 person up here. If you people can see my screen, but here's some of the definitions. A person is a human being, indefinitely. One, a man. Let a person's attainments never be so great. He should remember he is frail and imperfect. A person is a human being represented in dialogue, fiction, or on the stage. A person is a character, a player who appears in the person of King Lear. And a person is also defined as, in law, an artificial person is a corporation or body politic. And and I saw this from you. That this was a profound. It's a profound, I think, awakening to realize that the legalese system that's based off Roman trust law, like all words have different meanings than what you think they are. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe like when you are registered with the surname, though, like you are now in the eyes of the law a person, and persons, are essentially serfs. They have no rights, and this is why interestingly, like, in the U.S. courts, this goes all the way back to 1850 with the case South versus Maryland. Interestingly, that was in a very Catholic colony of Maryland. But recently, there was a Supreme Court case, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, where like the police or American quote citizens like have no like the police have no duty or obligation to protect American citizens. Like American citizens, like
United
are
States
yeah
citizens.
thank you, yeah, United States citizens. That's the proper way to say it. United States citizens, have absolutely no um, uh, I get because this was the case that let me get my facts. So the Supreme Court case was a woman had a restraining order, and the police. She was on the phone with the police for hours because it was her ex-husband who like, was calling her, making threats, saying, "I'm going to take the kids and like hurt them." It's Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, is the case. But it was ruled through the courts that she did not have a. This is the way I wanted to say it. Citizens, Americans, U.S. citizens have no property interest in being protected by police. So the police have ruled that it's up to their discretion if they even want to protect you or not. So a policeman can actually see you as a United States citizen being like beaten by like let's say like a gang of four guys with clubs, like a crew of like six police can come up and just watch you being beat. And according to the highest court in the land, like the police have done absolutely nothing wrong,
Sure.
which is
And that applies to you as well. That's the whole Good Samaritan concept. And you have as much right as the police. Because police just means policy. That's all it means. They're walking policy machines. So they do the bidding of the municipal corporation they work for, and they collect revenue for it. Right? That's it. That's what they do. They have no other job than to be the policy enforcers of the municipal corporation. Don't ever put morals or values or ethics on police. That is not their job. Right? To protect and serve, that is such a fallacy. To protect and serve, in I think it was Los Angeles, like in the 1960s, I think it was, the police department there had a contest, and someone suggested they wanted a motto, and so they put it to the people. They said, let's have a contest, and whoever comes up with the best motto for the police wins, and we'll use that motto, and it'll be on all our things. Someone came up with to protect and serve, and they used it. It has no relevance to law, right? To serve means to serve process, first of all. So they're there when someone wants to sue you, they'll be there to make sure you get, process. Everybody has the right to serve process. So again, that's policy. Everybody has the right to protect someone else from crime. That's policy. But you also have the right not to. So what are police but you? That's what people don't really get. You have the right to arrest people. You do. All of us. Go look it up. It's in the law. And in your state law, you will find you have the power of the police. No one uses it, though, because you're all scared. You're all scared of consequences because you're in the land of consequences. You're in the land of causality. And if you go and arrest a judge, which you have every right to do, you know that they have friends and they have friends and they're all connected and it's organized crime and you're probably fucking with the wrong person. So you're scared to do it. But if everybody did it, if the second you saw a crime, you actually went up and arrested somebody just like you have the right to do, everything would change. However, we're all scared to do that. We say, oh, that's what the police are for. Obviously, that's not what the police are for. The police are there to protect the interests of the municipal corporations, which are corporations of the state, which is another municipal corporation, which is created by the main municipal corporation in the United States. That's all it is. It's a corporate, international law, commercial interest.
yeah, and
That's
Clinton,
what police are.
Clinton, but this with police, like that, people don't know, like that's why they were actually created in the United States. Well, at least the first state police was the Pennsylvania State Police, created in 1903. But it was basically just an extension of the Coal and Iron Works Police Force, which was a Pinkerton type force. And the reason they had to create this force is because there was mass strikes going on at this time at all of the coal and steel plants in the Northeast United States, and they needed to bring in the strong arm of the law. And they found that a lot of the local police, wouldn't, the local police wouldn't want to bash in the heads and like suppress. Oh, it looks like Clint. I'll invite him back in here. But people don't know this. The local police, were hesitant to put down strikers that they knew, like their fellow citizens. Like many of the local police were probably friends with the workers protesting at this time. So that's why they had the need to bring in the state police, because the state police, they had no ties to anyone in the community. And they can just act as just a straight strong arm.
So and if you think about that for a moment, what was the difference between the Pinkerton police, right, doing the bidding of the essentially the union pre-union kind of concept? What's the difference between that and the KKK? I don't see any difference, right? What they were the KKK was doing the bidding of the local people, right? That's there's no difference between those two concepts. Now today, it's much more organized. And there's all kinds of things, and you really want to know what police can and can't do. Go get a copy if you can of their employee handbook, their duty handbook, right? Which tells them what they it'll tell them who they can mess with and who they can't. Who can you extort and who can't you extort, right?
Oh, Clint,
So
I'm just you're getting a little bit of feedback there. Just want to let you know. Just like it started just about like 10 seconds or 15 seconds ago or so.
no, I disconnected on accident and
But yeah, I recommend people should look at the police manuals and just I don't know if you saw this video I did, Clint. This is a really interesting phenomena, at least in the United States and Canada, is the Knights of Columbus. And if you've seen the group, like their logo has the military fasces in it. Jeb Bush, the governor of Florida, is a fourth degree Knight of Columbus. They're essentially like a Catholic kind of Freemasonic type of society, and there's Knights of Columbus lodges set up in all of the communities across America and Canada, just like the Freemasonic lodges. But I found in almost every single community, no matter how large, the big cities, obviously, but even small towns like Mesquite, Nevada, for instance, the Knights of Columbus actually honor the local police in every single community. And so they put this out, kind of in plain sight. And there was a story recently in Buffalo, New York, where two ex-Buffalo cops came out and testified to the Buffalo News that the Buffalo Police Department had, I think this was kind of, I guess, the unwritten code, but like all Catholic priests who were brought in on accusations of pedophilia and who were caught like in the act were completely safe from any type of persecution. And the Buffalo Police Department would just suppress all these scandals within the Catholic bishops and just
oh,
silence them.
did you ever? I don't know. Early on in my blog, I did a couple of entries that were cracking the cult of the Constitution was the name of them, and it goes into all the stuff that you're talking about now, especially the fact that police, sheriffs especially, are all Masons. And you look, I've got all the patches listed there, and all the pictures of all the again Roman fasci and the Masonic symbol, compass in the square, etc. That's on all of the uniforms and all the patches for the police. Right there, I mean it's blatantly in your face. The other aspect of it, and if you consider what that means, let's say I go to court. And judges are Masons, okay? Because Masonry isn't really what you think. Masonry. I have a book written by a Mason who was literally a victim of his own oath, right? Who wrote a book exposing Masonry, and when I read it, I knew that the reason they killed this guy. Maybe I can spot it here in a minute, but the reason they killed this guy is because he told the truth, and that is that Masonry is completely nonsense. It's absolutely 100% organized crime. In other words, they get together, they join a club. Whoa. That sounds bad.
Well, just your sound's cracking up a little bit, Clem. I could hear the crux of what you were saying though. There, masonry, absolutely is organized crime. And, I found an interesting source. I'll email you this, like the two parts to this book. It was from the 1800s. I think you would find it interesting. It was written by a Jonathan Blanchard. The book was titled Scotch Rite Masonry Profusely Illustrated, and he illustrates. I don't know how he was able to get these photos, but he shows an illustrative breakdown of all of the different rituals of Freemasonry. But this Jonathan Blanchard, who wrote this book in 1888, I believe, called Scotch Rite Freemasonry Profusely Illustrated. He shows that the 32nd degree of Freemasonry uses the identical motto to the Jesuit order, and that is Ad Morgium El Gloriam. And that's I think that in the Scottish Rite system, that's known as like the Prince of the Royal Sublime Secret. And I found on Masonic sources that the Scottish Masonry websites claim that the 32nd degree is their quote military degree, and I find that very intriguing. I'll send you the book over email, Clint. But
if you can, wow, that's really bad. Can I try to log out again and log back in, maybe?
yeah, you can. Yeah, I could even I could remove you from the stream, and you could come back.
Let me just try to close this whole session. And try to.
Yeah, Clint will be back here shortly. Yeah, we had that issue just before we were setting up the stream here. It took us a little bit to get Clint's audio in order. And actually, I'll show you that source here that I mentioned for the Freemasonry having the identical motto to the Jesuits. This was the very first post I put on my new blog, Jesuit World Order. I did this post when I was still posting on Rome Rules. So it'll be faster to type it in this way. Yeah, this was the headline here. I wrote, the motto of the Jesuits is the same motto as the 32nd degree of Scottish Rite Masonry. Yeah, and this came from the book Scottish Rite Masonry Illustrated, the complete ritual of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, profusely illustrated by Jonathan Blanchard, Volume 2. This came out in 1888, pages 470, 457, 458. And you see here the importance to the 32nd degree is the motto Ad Morgium Del Gloriam, and that is the motto of the Jesuit order. Oh, I see Clint's back in here now.
Testing.
Oh, that's better. Yeah, that's
So, if you can get a hold of this book, let's see if I can hold it up here. It's called, I don't know if you can see that.
Illustrations of Masonry by one of the. Is that Captain W.M. Morgan's? Is that the author? I haven't seen that book before. Thanks for showing that.
Here's what it says, and this puts it into perspective, in my opinion. Are we astonished at the wild and heedless manner in which many of the votaries of Masonry rush into every excess, putting at defiance the laws of our civil institutions, which suffer no one to put in jeopardy, but by due forms, and disregarding the command of the Most High, God, which says, "Thou shalt not kill," we can readily trace the cause to the impressions and practices obtained from its false tenets and descriptive arrogance. And here's where he really just, I mean, you want to expose Masonry, you expose that there's nothing behind it. It's completely false. Masonry is to the modern world what the whore of Babylon was to the ancients. And, is my sound bad again?
Oh yeah, I got the quote though. You said Masonry is the whore of Babylon.
Yeah, but he
The
really lays it out. I don't know what's going on. Let me try something else here.
it's unfortunate with the audio here. Yeah, no rush on that though. See if we can get it sorted out. I'm going to search up that book. I have some ways to get PDFs off the internet via. There's a great website that I recommend all researchers check out. Library Genesis. I think libgen.is. They have lots of PDFs you can get there for free of some rare books, and also in general, like with some of with the rare book that Clint's holding up now, I recommend people take the time to go to your local library. A lot of libraries will have these more rare books that expose a lot of information that the system tries to keep hidden from us, and they'll let you scan in books
Yeah,
at
but
libraries for free.
the important is that better?
Oh yeah, that's a lot better there. Yeah.
So the important aspect is, you're always talking about secret societies, right? Here's the secret about secret societies. They make their own secrets. None of them are fucking real. They create the symbols, the secretive symbols. They, in turn, uh, cause confusion and misunderstanding about what the symbol means. These symbols that people chase after and want to know what they mean, they don't mean anything. They're completely bullshit. They're like Boy Scout badges. They mean nothing except to the people in the society, right? So they created them. Again, they're not symbols of God. They're not symbols of nature. They're not reality. And I can't stress how important that is. They are the creators of their own secrets. There are no actual secrets in nature. And if there are, the things that we're not supposed to know about the universe because we're stuck here on Earth, they don't know them. They might pretend they know them, but they don't.
No, that's a great point, Clinton. Your audio, it was good there for about the first 35 seconds, and then it's got a little wavier. But no, that's a great point. These guys, like all secret societies, and it was the author Lord Robert Montagu, who wrote. This was in 1887. He wrote this. Let me pull up the book here exactly. But Lord Robert Montagu claimed this was a British statesman. He claimed that the Roman Catholic Church is the largest secret society in the world, whereby Freemasonry is merely a pygmy. And he zeroed in on and this was in his book Recent Events and a Clue to Their Solution from 1885. That's where that quote comes from. But Lord Robert Montagu claimed that, in particular, the Jesuit secret society, but the Vatican as a whole, as a secret society, is the world's largest secret society. And there's thousands, just within the Vatican, there's probably 15 Masonic type knighthoods. You have the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Saint Sylvester, the Knights of Saint Gregory the Great, the Knight of the Royal Order of Saint Janarius. And when you look into Masonry, the Vatican and Masonry are very close and seem to be.
Okay, yeah. Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts. I give a shit about what they call themselves. Because once you realize they're full of crap, that their secrets are their own, their secrets didn't come from the cosmos or from the universe, they're not of God, they're of evil, they're literally the Babylon, then you don't really care anymore. The only reason you should care is that those symbols are on all your government buildings. All of these things that we see on a daily basis, right? That's the reason you should care, and that tells you you're in Babylon, right? So that, again, these are the things that we must strive to not believe in, to not put our faith in, to love. We cannot afford it anymore because their system has gotten so out of control that we're rebuilding that Tower of Babylon, that Tower of Babel, which is the internet. Translation: we now have a common language which is digital, right? We now are in the Matrix internationally, so we're building that Tower of Babel. He says, Masonry is to the modern world what the Whore of Babylon was to the ancient world, and is the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, ready to tear out our bowels and scatter them to the 4 winds of heaven. Masonry gives rogues and evil-minded characters an opportunity of visiting upon their devoted victim all the ills attending combined power when exerted to accomplish destruction. It works unseen at all silent hours and secret times and places, and like death, when summoning his diseases, pounces upon its devoted subject and lays him prostrate in the dust. Like the great enemy of man, it has shown its cloven foot and put the public upon its guard against its secret mechanisms. What it's saying here is that this is the root of organized crime, and it extends into the policymakers, the government. It extends into the policy keepers, which is the policy, the police. It extends into the judges of that policy, and it extends into obviously the executive branch, which is the sheriff or the governor or the president or the mayor. Right?
Well,
This is why
Clint, just historically, people can see like Joseph Stalin, the infamous dictator, World War II era Soviet Russia. Like he was educated at a Jesuit seminary in Tiflis, Georgia, that people don't know. But Stalin was a Mason. Like he did it all the time. He would do Freemasonic. He would do the right hand in the coat, all sorts. You can see him do Stalin doing Masonic, handshakes. All these guys are like Hitler. You can see Hitler doing it. Francisco Franco. All of the leaders, of the world are in this,
and if you think about it, if you're not a criminal, if you're not interested in moving up the ladder of corporatism and government, there's no reason for you to join Masonry, right? Now, I grew up in California, in outside of Sacramento, so I never knew what Masonry is. But you talk to somebody on the East Coast, Ohio, Youngstown, that kind of thing, they knew. Anybody that was anybody was a Mason, and the captains of industry, because it's organized crime. Right? You don't become a captain of industry. You don't become a man of renown, a giant in industry, without being a Mason, without being organized crime. Just like Trump doesn't become a casino owner, for God's sake, unless he's organized crime. Right? So you're talking about what you're talking about. That is the great secret behind Masonry. It is not some esoteric thing. The only reason they create that esoteric and they reenact all that shit is because anybody in their moral right mind, anybody not of the system of Babylon, would not participate in it. They'd recognize it for what it is, which is what Captain M. Morgan did. And they slit his throat according to his oath, because he gave away the greatest secret in this book, which is that it's just fraud. That the secrets are not secrets. They're lies. They're nothing. They have no secrets. They're organized freaking crime. And this goes into, I think, oh, but it's the Jews. Oh, but it's the Jesuits. Oh, but it's the Masons. Oh, but it's the gay mafia. Whatever it is that you believe is controlling things, I guarantee you all those fingers are joined to the same hand. And that's where we come to the notion of controlled opposition. If I am my own opposition, for instance, if I start there was the Masonic Party to be president, and there was the anti-Masonic Party which of course was a bunch of clandestine, Masons or brothers of a different brotherhood, right? They're all the same, but if you can control and be a part of one of these orders, all those orders you mentioned and everything, well then it seems like they're against each other, and sometimes they have wars and fight against each other. Those are just moves. And I'll give you a perfect example. Israel. Now, everybody equates Israel to Jews. It has nothing to do with Jews. Jews are the excuse. Jews are the tears, the story they use to justify what they did. But it was England. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, if you look up the Kingdom of Jerusalem, you find that England held that, the Kingdom of Great Britain held that for for a couple centuries until it was fallen in 1217, and I think the queen at that time was Queen Elizabeth, one of the original Queen Elizabeths, right? So you had the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which is why in the 1900s England finally got it back, because they were defeated. They lost that part of their kingdom, and that was part of what they called Greater Israel, or Eretz, I can't remember the full term, which was on the fucking Roman coins. Eretz Israel. Eretz Israel. On these old Roman coins. So what you have with Israel is a perfect example of controlled opposition, or one finger of the same hand, where England goes in on behalf of the Vatican, essentially, takes over. It wasn't Jews that conquered Israel or Palestine, excuse me. It was the English army, and then the Jews take credit for it and all this stuff. Now the Jews have a homeland. That's all bullshit. Their whole idea was to recreate their vision of Greater Israel, which was from the Nile to the Mediterranean. I can't remember I've got it all in my blog. But the point is, the load of crap that they feed us, the justification for going into Palestine and literally stealing all these people's homes, had nothing to do with Jews. It had everything to do with taking back the kingdom of Jerusalem, which is something you can look up for yourself.
Oh, great information, Clint. And I think part of that was, too, the Pope wanted to, I think maybe the long-term goal of the papacy is that he wants to move his headquarters to Jerusalem, so because it makes it biblical as the holy city. The papacy has long lusted for Jerusalem, and it was 1993. Shimon Peres, the president of Israel, who was a Vatican Knight of Saint Gregory the Great, signed the 1993 Oslo Accord with the Vatican, which gave them full tax-exempt status within the state of Israel. The Vatican is a massive, quote-unquote, property owner in Israel, like they are all over the world. Like, they own the biggest hotel in Jerusalem, the Notre Dame Center, and ultimately, they're part of, and actually, it was the founding, this is what I want to mention, it was Zeev Jabotinsky was known as the founder of militant Zionism. And he referenced fascist Catholic Italy as his spiritual homeland. Like, he would go to Rome to receive instruction. Even like the Jesuit who founded the Bilderberg group, Joseph Rettinger, S.J., he was actually involved with the founding of the State of Israel as well. He was meeting with the leaders of the Zionist movement at that time, like Chaz Wiseman, for instance. And a lot of people don't know, like, Theodore Herzl himself, before the creation of the State of Israel, had like a private audience with the Pope.
So the question then is, what is the Jesuits, right? Why do the Jesuits exist? And the answer is very simple. The Jesuits are literally the controlled opposition of the Roman Catholic Church, the corporation. That's all it is. It is an enemy that is a friend. Like, they'll pretend they're against each other all the time, and you'll read that the Jesuits infiltrated the church. No. No, it's a creation of the church, right? It's just like the Muslim Brotherhood is a creation of a Christian organization.
Well, absolutely. I would say the Jesuits, they do play games with openly, they'll come out and get into open dialogues where supposedly, certain Jesuits are beefing with, let's say, certain Dominicans within the church. But the Jesuits, I would say, the best description of them are the Navy SEALs of the Vatican. Pat Buchanan, who was educated by Jesuits, called them the Pope's Marines. I think G. Gordon Liddy, who was educated by Jesuits, G. Gordon Liddy actually, in his autobiography, there's a, I'll read that to you because I think you'd find that interesting. G. Gordon Liddy refers to them as the shock troops of the Catholic Church.
If he's calling them Marines or shock troops or whatever think about what that means about our Marines. I mean, think about what Marines or Navy SEALs do. They go into countries illegally to cause political change, to kill people, to, destroy villages, to destroy leaders. So that's actually a good comparison. Because, in other words, they're the illegal organized criminal outfit of the church. The things that the church wants done, they turn to their controlled opposition. something that is against the law of the church in order to get to advance the meaning or the purpose of the church.
Well, actually, a great example of this, Clint, is that officially the Vatican is against abortion, like officially within like the catechism, but it was actually like a platoon of Jesuits. It was Jesuit Robert Drinan S.J., who was actually a United States congressman while being an ordained Jesuit priest. Richard McCormick, S.J. in a certain like this. Me and researcher Johnny Cerrucci covered this in one of our team briefs. But it was essentially like a platoon of 6 Jesuits that actually convinced the Catholic Kennedy family to become pro-abortion, and it was the Jesuits that actually initiated the shift within the Catholic Church to become pro-abortion. So you can see they're engaging on the opposite side of the dialectic, but ultimately they're working to keep the Vatican, in power.
But they are the dialectic. That's the whole point of controlled opposition, is to be both sides or all 3 sides, whatever, of the dialectic, right? That is the purpose of creating these secret societies who act outside of and disrupt all systems that we all, as good old citizens, try to obey. It is organized crime. That's the only way I can really put it into clear construct, is to just call it what it is, which is organized crime, the breaking of law through sort of a clandestine licensure.
Oh, absolutely. There's examples abound that show like how this system is complete organized crime. I remember, if you've heard the name Tom Pendergast, this guy's a very interesting character because this guy was basically the mob boss of Kansas City, and Tom Pendergast was very close with Harry Truman. But while Tom Pendergast was mob boss of Kansas City, he controlled the various prostitution rings. He had the judges bought, the local legislator bought out. But Tom Pendergast was a Knight of Columbus who'd go to Catholic Mass every day, and it was President Truman who was very close with them. And then when Pendergast was eventually brought in, Harry Truman gave him full pardon. So he had absolutely a clean quote legal record. So you can see this fictional system that they've created. They use towards their own ends, perpetually to increase their control. They'll throw the book at you completely if you're not part of their group, but if you are part of the clique, you'll get full presidential pardon. A recent case with that was a Canadian media magnate, Conrad Black, was indicted in the United States for a bunch of money laundering charges. He would take the profits from his company and put them into his own pocket. I think he was looking at 7 or 8 years in jail, but the Supreme Court actually changed the definition of bribery in his case. But this is an example that papal knights like Conrad Black received, and President Donald Trump recently came out and pardoned this guy, fully. There's endless examples like this, where the legal system. It's the people that are in these secret society networks that get, the protection from the courts. There's literally endless examples.
Yeah, and in my opinion, Zionism is kind of like the political hitman of of the whole thing, because they're the ones that come out and take people like me. I wrote a blog about this just couple of weeks ago. Someone said, I can't get to your website at work because my website is now labeled by the ADL and other organizations similar to it, the Anti-Defamation League, which wholly exhibits nothing but defamation towards people. It says that my company's proxy blocks the reality blogger website because of intolerance. I am labeled by the international Zionist lobbies, which have nothing to do with Jewish people, by the way, as an intolerant website. So when you try to go to my website, it's going to give you a warning in certain places, especially corporations, hotels and shit, that my, my website is one of intolerance and that you shouldn't go there, that it's going to give you bad information, etc., etc. Completely untrue, but, what do you do? And so what I wanted to I wanted to read you because I think this is so. I think this is so important. I just gotta find it. Sorry. Ah.
Oh, and this I think that Zionism is just another branch of the Vatican. I think that this goes back hundreds of years. It was like Freemason Napoleon with his Jesuit advisor Abbate Sieyes. SJ, like Napoleon wanted to create the state of Israel going all the way back in the early 1800s, and it's the same. It's tying it into the Bible. It's that the Pope wants to be like the master of Israel, which in the Bible is referenced as like the holy place, and that's why like the modern nation of Israel has no relation to what Israel is being like referred to in the Bible. But that's what the papacy wants with this creation of the modern political state.
Well, let me read you, just so we're clear, because it's very important to understand two things. One, the law of England, the common law, is the Bible. And once you go past the Bible law, again saying do not respect persons, do not respect flattering titles, including the King of England, do not doing any of these things, right? Then you enter into this law of the sea, law, contract law, etc. And you've left the realm of God. And it's very important to understand that this is the New Testament, or the Christian so-called law that we're under as common law, and it's where the principles of law come from that actually protect you. Once you get into contract, though, of course, those principles disappear because you no longer have access to the law of God or the law of nature. So that law was carried over into America. The Bible was listed as the common law in Pennsylvania, and it was actually illegal at some point in the history of Pennsylvania to speak poorly or criticize Jesus Christ, because it was the law. Jesus Christ was the law, right? That's why it's so important to understand that Jesus Christ is the personification of law. So if you speak badly of Christ, you're literally speaking badly of the very common law that holds the whole thing together. Now, they created the nations as secular corporations to get away from the common law. None of us are in common law. We have no access to common law. We're in civil law, which is the worst possible place you can be. Religious law being the highest law. Now, here is what the Bible says about Jew. Now, the king, when he translated the word Jew, he did it in two different words, Iudios and Yahudi. And it's important to understand that I'm saying this wrong, I'm sure. Iudios is the term that means Jewish, belonging to the Jewish nation. Remember, nation is not a real thing. As respects to Jewish, as respect to birth, origin, religion. This is not talking about a race. This is talking about people who adhere to a certain ethnicity, which is language and practice, okay? The Jewishness is not a race, and we have to understand that in order to understand why anti-Semitism is such a lie. It's a trick used to basically fool everybody into thinking that Jewishness is a race when it's not. Here's what the concordance actually says. It's very important. This is the concordance of the King James Bible, the very copyrighted Bible that is the common law, right? Restricting ourselves to the employment of these three words in the New Testament, referring to what was transferred or mistransliterated, if you will, to the word Jew, we may say that in the first is predominantly noted language, and the second nationality. Remember, nationality refers to Goyim, actually, so they're not Jews, they're just saying they are. And in the third, theocratic privileges and glorious vocation. So what is the Iudios, or Jew? In this case, we're talking about the language spoken, which is your ethnicity, nationality, which is, again, an artificial construct, and a legal construct. And in the third, your theocratic or your priesthood privileges. And the glorious vocation, of course, is the teaching of this notion of Judaism. Under the word Hebrew, Israelite, or Jew, let's see, the Apostle John, inasmuch as agreeably to the state of things in his day, he looked upon the Jews as a body of men hostile to Christianity, with whom he had come to see that both he and all true Christians, followers of Christ, had nothing in common as respects to religious matters. Even in his record of the life of Jesus, not only himself makes as a distinction between the Jews and Jesus, but ascribes to Jesus and his apostles language in which they specifically distinguish themselves from the Jews, as though the latter sprang from an alien race. And those who, not only at Jerusalem, but also in Galilee, opposed his divine master and his master's cause, especially the rulers, priests, members of the Sanhedrin, the Pharisees, he does not hesitate to style the Iudios, the Jew, since the hatred of these leaders exhibits the hatred of the whole nation of quote-unquote Israel towards Jesus, right? Now, when you read that in the very concordance that you're supposed to use to translate the words, and then you look at what Zionism and these organizations have done to completely try to integrate Jewish and Christian organizations and religions to the point where you have the Jewish knowing that Jews are anti-Christian, completely against Christianity in every way possible, right? Knowing that, understanding that's what the meaning is here in the Bible. Think about that for a moment. Think about how Judaism, or this sort of false idea of an Israelite, the Israelite. We're talking about those who fell from being an Israelite into being a Jew, which meant this Iudios, it meant those opposed to Christianity in every way, right? Think about the power, again, here to define terms. They've redefined the term Jew to be a friend of Christianity. They have literally used the Anglican Church and the protector of the realm, the protector of the church, to go in and reclaim Israel for the Jews, which are completely diametrically opposed to Christianity, the real true Christianity. And that's because the Queen of England is a Jew by this meeting. This meeting, in other words, the Pope, the Queen, and anyone that heads these artificial churches, the ones the Bible says clearly shouldn't exist, and who call themselves anti-Christ, or the replacements of Christ, because the Queen and King does that too. I mean, you're talking about Jews calling themselves Christians. Those who are anti-Christ, against Christianity, are in the systems of, or heads of powers of places that call themselves Christian. So this explains so much. If you take away the emotional and the prejudicial and the so-called ethnicity, the racial context, which doesn't actually exist because Jewish is not a race. It literally means to be against Christianity. Then everything starts to make sense. You understand how Jews are being, people who call themselves Jews because they have no idea what their history is. Most of them are atheists, right? You see how they're being used as chess pieces.
Absolutely, and just I would say that in terms of the alliance between Zionism and quote unquote Christianity, that being the Catholic Church, this was really went forward with the Vatican II Congress that was declared in 1965, and that Vatican II was dominated by Jesuits such as Courtney Murray S.J. and Karl Rahner, but and they're being used as chess pieces, because they're mixing up the definitions, as you say, and but the thing is with the Jewish people, and they're being persecuted, um, you know, predominantly by the Catholic Church, at least historically. If you look at from the year, let's say 1200 to all the way up to Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, Hitler's government being predominantly Catholic. Hitler himself was born to Catholic parents. Hitler announced in every single year in the Who's Who, the German Who's Who, that he was Catholic. It was a Catholic politician, the mayor of Austria, mayor of Vienna, Austria, Karl Lueger, who was inspired Hitler for his anti-Jewish policies. And again, Hitler. I just want to. So there's a distinct difference between like the legal term that the Anti-Defamation League has set up for Jews and just ordinary Jewish people who historically have been one of the most persecuted. It's been one of the most persecuted religions, in human history.
Well, again, you're talking about when you're talking about what they're saying are Jews were the Israelites, and the Israelites were a people who followed the law of God. Those who fell from being Israelites were what was called the Jews. And that distinction is not being made clear, and that's why most if you come amongst an honest quote unquote Jew who's been indoctrinated into that system, they take Sarah Silverman, the comedian. I hate Christ. I'd kill him again. That kind of thing. It's all the same. It's always the same behind closed doors or in that horrible thing that we call comedy, stand-up comedy, where they're all these what do you call them? Self-hating Jews? I don't know. But it's so frustrating to watch as the Jewish culture, which is absolutely secular atheism. About 80-something% are atheists, except for the Orthodox. And the Orthodox don't even believe Israel should exist as a state because they're still waiting for their Savior, because they don't believe Jesus Christ is the Savior. They don't believe the New Testament law is their Savior, because it goes against the Jewish law, which says I can extort everybody but my fellow Jew. Again, it's just an organized crime. It's not a race. It's not a religion. It's organized crime.
Well, I would say also many, all religions, but especially the Catholic Church, will use verses from the Old Testament to justify a lot of the evil actions that they use. Like the verses from Exodus where it says it's okay to beat like your chattel slave. They'll use that as an excuse. Oh, you see, like we were following the Bible when we genocided the 700,000 Orthodox Serbs in Croatia, like from 1941 to 1945. And I would just say with I do think though that the Vatican. And they do this very, they're very clever with this because like they're controlling all. They have the top leadership of Zionism working with them. They're in the global secret society structure. But history has shown that the Vatican and the Jesuits will use Jews as a scapegoat. And a great example of this was the Dreyfus affair in France. The late 1800s and the early 1900s. This Dreyfus affair has completely polarized France. It ushered in like just a super irrational wave of anti-Jewish hatred because there was this French general Alfred Dreyfus was falsely convicted of giving French military secrets to the Germans when in reality it was a devout Catholic papal knight Ferdinand Walsen Esterhazy who leaked it. You see like in the court Jews, like the Rothschild family, for instance, was actually kind of encouraging this anti-Semitic hysteria within France at this time. And the Rothschilds in the Jewish encyclopedia are defined as the guardians of the papal treasure, for instance. And so that's why for me, like, it's important. Like, I'm not an apologist, for Zionism. Basically they've turned Israel into a police state. Like it's essentially, kind of like a quasi-martial law system of government that they've set up. There's a lot of hatred, being promoted by the Israeli media, towards Muslims, and that's probably rightfully so because a lot of the reason they're doing that is because like Jesuit co-opted groups like the Council on American Islamic relations. CARE is the abbreviation, which is set up by Jesuit trained at Santa Clara Omar Ahmad. This Muslim group is calling for like the worldwide extermination of Jews, for instance. So like they're not making the distinction. Like they're not calling for the extermination of the Zionist political movers and shakers. They're just
Well,
calling for regular, Jewish people.
wouldn't you? I mean, if you had this rogue, quote unquote, state that was declared illegitimate by every legitimate organization in the world, who's legally stealing the lands of people, and you knew that it's not only an effort to steal land, but to change the law, to change the very structure and religion of that area. What wouldn't you? I mean, barring
I would make the distinction that I would zero in on like the Vatican and Freemasonic Jesuit leadership. The British Empire is part of that. The real movers and shakers that
sure,
enabled Israel.
but we're talking about people who they're pawns. So, if you think in the terms of being a pawn, which we all are, I mean, essentially, then you're not going to be familiar with all these terms, and they don't have the internet over there. They haven't for until just recently, right? So they don't have this ability to put these pieces together and know that what they're doing is a controlled opposition. In other words, they're doing the bidding by wanting to kill a certain, what they consider a race or this or that they're doing the bidding of people who cannot have power unless that happens, right? So you're just talking about a giant chessboard where a bunch of pawns have been taught to hate each other. And that's what Zionism, that's what the Anti-Defamation League does. They do it, the Anti-Defamation League, people probably don't know this, but all of the Holocaust education that's going on in schools, all these kids that are being brought on these whirlwind tours of to teach them how to be Jewish, which basically means hate everybody else. And all these education programs, gender acceptance, all of this is coming from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, which has one goal: to promote Jewishness as Zionist, basically Zionistness, and to basically destroy every other culture, open every other border but Israel, do everything you can to completely make defunct the system that is based on Christianity or the system that is based on Islam. Right? That is their goal. And they're doing it brilliantly because nobody's looking. Nobody goes to the Anti-Defamation website unless you're Jewish, basically. But if you do and you look up their education programs, you're going to find out most of the shit your kids are learning that are turning them into little monsters are coming from the Anti-Defamation League. All this bathroom nonsense and educational, what's it called, non-binary, these are all offshoots of these same controlled opposition lobbies. So it's to blame one group or the other is wrong. And the second you say it's the Jews, then you're labeled and you're intolerant. But if you say the so-called Jews are just part of the same hand, one finger, right, of the same hand, well then suddenly you've risen above it all. Right, you understand that these are all just controlled oppositions of the same opposition.
Yeah, this is where I think it goes back to. This is a powerful drawing that Sir Francis Bacon. Sir Francis Bacon's whole philosophy, was the philosophy of the Jesuit Freemasonic aristocratic class. He wrote about the empire of the philosophers in the New Atlantis. But I just want to say, like, they create, they control both sides of the dialectic, and I was pointing out how they control Zionism. They also control high-powered Islam. Like recently, there was a Saudi king, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia, who was actually knighted into a strictly Roman Catholic order, the Order of the Golden Fleece. And this guy is supposedly, a Muslim king. And Saudi and the Vatican has legal diplomatic relations with 180 countries or corporations all over the world, because the Vatican isn't just a church; it has its own, political representation. But to show how they control the Jewish side, also there's this character, David P. Steinem. If you heard the JINSA group, Jewish Institute of Security, National Security Affairs in America, it's one of the, you could say, like the more pro-militant Zionist groups with the Anti-Defamation League. But the president and chairman of JINSA, David Steinem, got his doctorate from the Jesuits at Georgetown, for instance. And I just for my research, like it's the same. It's the Jesuits that seem to be like the ultimate puppet masters. Like
They're
Karl
the
Marx.
infiltrators.
Yeah, exactly. Like Karl Marx, for instance, was like a famous Jewish writer, the founder of communism. Karl Marx, that people don't know, was actually educated at a Jesuit college in Trier, called the Friedrich Wilhelm Gymnasium. That's even on his biography.com page. And you see, so like, and Marx himself, I think, engaged in this dialectic. It's the dialectic the Jesuits have to ultimately, I think, remove. It's in their interest to have people thinking the real root of the problem in society is Israel rather than the Vatican, because our entire system of law, the trust law that we were describing earlier, is based off of Roman trust law rather than State of Israel codifications. Like Israel as a state, as a modern state, didn't come into existence until the 40s, while the Roman Empire, which has continued today, that's why the Treasury building of the U.S. is literally an identical model of a Roman Empire Treasury building from like the year 300.
But see, this goes back to what we were talking about originally. Well, what these groups do is they control your belief. But more accurately, a more accurate word is they control what you love. They control, therefore, what you put your actions to and toward. If they're controlling what you love, and everything you love is fiction, money, all the things that the Bible tells you not. See, the real trick here is they love that you. I mean, they're not going to shut us down. They're not going to say, "Oh, they found out our secrets." They're not secrets. You found them, therefore they're not secrets, right? So they love that we're blaming them for all our problems when they know that they wouldn't exist without volunteers, without members, without people who love. And see, the problem is love and hate are very synonymous, right? Because love means belief. Belief means love. If I believe that the dollar has value, then I both love and hate it. There's no difference because it's belief. I believe in something that isn't real, therefore I love it. And they're controlling our love. What should our love be for each other, for nature, for that which is truth? They represent everything which is untruth. And they have directed our love, our belief systems into everything that is what they are the purveyors of. Lies. They are Satan. I mean, they are organized crime, organized lies, organized Satan. That which is adversarial to nature, to reality, to truth. That's the only thing that Satan means. That which is adversarial to reality, to truth. Right? And that's where we're standing right now. To go full circle. We could sit here and talk about this till we're blue in the face, and it's not going to do any good until you self-actualize that you're caught in its web, and that you are the only one that can bring you out of its web. It's not going to be a national or a social thing, right? The Bible doesn't even give you that kind of hope. It says, hey, there's going to be, 144,000, and then there's going to be martyrs, which is kind of what I consider myself, maybe. There's going to be a very small group of people who get the hell out of this. And the more we expose this, yes, the more people will eventually come to that spiritual knowledge, spiritual understanding, and self-actualization, and become spiritually prepared for the time when, hey, that choice we were talking about, you're going to make it now, or you're never going to have the chance to make it again. Right? That's where we're coming to with globalization, with Agenda 2030, with all that stuff, is the point where your identity, which means sameness, right? I'm showing you a passport or a driver's license that claims that I am this person. But as soon as that persona becomes part of you genetically, structurally, transhumanism, that sort of thing, then you've broken the laws of nature in ways that can't be undone. And at that point, that choice can no longer, the choice to leave the system is no longer there for you because you've done something so unnatural, so ungodly. You've cast yourself in the image of man instead of in the image of God, and you're now not part of nature. You're not part of the natural order. The laws of nature, while they still control you, they are not the only laws that you must follow, right? So you've taken yourself out of the picture, and this is why, like I said, the Bible is the ultimate self-help book. The Bible is the ultimate system of law that allows you to escape what these people have inverted, right? That's what they've done. They've taken the Bible, they've taken religion, true religious action and freedom, and they've inverted it into their own sort of system, their matrix, if you will, that we're all plugged into and stuck in because we haven't learned how to leave it or that we can leave it. And on that note, I got to get going, but I can't stress enough that as much as we talk about this stuff, as much as we talk about all the fingers of the same hand, you know, the idea is that the hand is driving you to believe in something that is untrue, to believe that it has power when it actually doesn't. And until we get over that, until we again become like children again, go back to nature, or reborn as the Bible tells us to, till we crucify ourselves, which means to crucify all worldly things, the person, the titles, the wealth, all the things that we equate to reality, which are not reality. As soon as we go back to nature and worship nature as our God, in other words, the universe, and follow its law, then there's no point. Unless that's your, I'll put it to you this way, unless that is your goal, to be a son of God, to, as the Bible tells you to return to the law of nature through Jesus Christ, the example, then there's no point. You might as well accept that this is the way it is and profit from it or don't profit from it, but you might as well forget trying to ever be free or have true freedom, because the only way to do that, and this is why there's famous quotes that say that a Bible reading people cannot be enslaved. One of the most important quotes I think ever stated, and it's been stated in several different ways. A Bible reading people cannot be enslaved. Why? Because the Bible, every law in the Bible that is written is against what they use as tools to enslave us. Personhood, citizenship, membership to anything, respect of names, titles, numbers, symbols, authorities higher than God. Anything that makes you do something against the law of nature. Anything that is artificial. That's where we're at. And that's why I say the time is now on us in the next decade as Agenda 2030 and all this shit comes to fruition.
Yeah, I know, Clint, just really quickly, I have a video on my channel, Eric777, you might find interesting. The Intercept acquired this from the Pentagon, but the Pentagon this is an internal video that the Pentagon was teaching at all their war colleges, but they're basically predicting full-out martial law by 2030. Like, they're already, getting U.S. soldiers, and this is all over the world, military, like, last year was the biggest world, like, the record for most military spending ever, like, was last year.
You gotta understand, you're already in it, right? Okay, it has to be understood that if a king or a president or any nation, any governmental structure, any power structure, if they have the power to declare martial law, then you're already in it. It's just that it's called military rule until you get to the point where it's martial law. In other words, where the marshals, the executives of law, are called out to enforce it. Right now, you just have police, right? But when the marshals of law are called, right, martial law, then suddenly you're under absolute tyranny. And as I said, the only place you can go from democracy is tyranny. And tyranny is usually a short regime until it goes back into a higher, say, aristocracy, right? But you're in the time of great turmoil that's going to be happening. But you don't have to be a part of it if you leave the system. That's when it's not a guarantee that you're going to be safe, because what does the Bible say? The Bible says they will destroy us by offering us peace and safety, security. That is what will kill us all. It is what is killing us all, because we believe in this artificial sense of security, insurance, the military, police. As you said, their job is not to protect us. Their job is to protect the interests of the United States and all municipal corporations under it. Right?
Clinton, just really quickly, the United States especially is pretty much in already a great area of martial law with how militarized the police departments are. Like, just a couple programs, the Department of Homeland Security, which interestingly was all founded by Jesuit-educated Freemasons, like John C. Gannon, for instance, and Randy Beardsworth and Tom Ridge. But Department of Homeland Security has given out $34 billion to local police for them to militarize. And the Homeland Security also bought, I think, 1.6 billion rounds of hollow point bullets for themselves. And the Department of Defense has a police militarization program called 1033, which I think has given $6 billion out to the police. There was a court case in 2014. I don't know if you've heard of this, Clint, but there's something now called a constitution-free zone, 100 miles within like the entire coastlines in the northern and southern border of the United States. There's like 200 million Americans in this zone, but like the police now have legal right to, they can literally do whatever you like
So
whatever they like to, you know.
Here's the thing. This is not the first time this has happened. Okay, you have to understand that's what the Civil War was. When, just to read it, I can read Lincoln's executive order, May 18th, 1864. You will take possession by military force of the printing establishments of the New York World and Journal of Commerce, and prohibit any further publication thereof. You are therefore commanded forthwith to arrest and imprison the editors, proprietors, and publishers of the aforementioned newspapers. What makes you think that if this happened in 1864, which is really when the United States Corporation took over the entirety of the country, that is when really the sea spilled onto the land, right? If you think that this is the first time in history this is going to happen, I give you the Civil War.
Well, actually, Clinton, you're right, and people can look this up. Abraham Lincoln put the entire United States into a declaration of martial law. But even before this is the first case or documented case I found. But this was General Andrew Jackson. This is after the War of 1812 when he was commanded as I guess he was to quote unquote guard the city of New Orleans. But Andrew Jackson put the city of New Orleans, I guess, in the surrounding county area under like a court of martial law this was an extended period of time for like over a year and a half. So like, I guess the point being, like, the United States has a rich history of the government going out to full military rule. Like, even in Colorado in the early 1900s, the state of Colorado was under martial law for 4 years.
Look,
to get out the union workers.
Every constitution in history. Okay, for some reason, the United States believes that their constitution is special, but all constitutions are Masonic. You can look it up, the Book of Constitutions by the Masons. That's what a constitution comes from. All of them, from Germany to France to England, have the right to suspend their constitution at any time, which means the constitution is bogus in the first place. Again, if you have the power to suspend the law is pointless. The law is there strictly for commerce, for free flow of commerce. The second they want to end that or do something or change power, they simply suspend the Constitution. They always have had the right. Now, how do they do that? National emergency. Black's Law defines national emergency as a state of national crisis, a situation demanding immediate and extraordinary national or federal action. Brown versus Bernstein says Congress has made little or no distinction between a state of national emergency and a state of war.
Actually, Clint, just really quickly, aren't there, like, I know Trump signed a national emergency, but aren't there like 18 outstanding national emergency?
At any one time, we still have the one from 9/11, which is huge. He just, all you have to do is every, I think, year, you just reclaim, or every 4 years, I can't remember, you just redo it, say, okay, I'm continuing George Bush's executive order.
And that's essentially what Trump did. Well, I think he used the border situation as his excuse, but Trump declared a national emergency.
We'll just end on this so that you have no delusions here. In 1933, Congress literally proclaimed that every U.S. citizen should cross over into voluntary suretyship for the purposes of collateralizing the United States government corporation in bankruptcy, while at the same time granting dictatorial powers, the doctrine of emergency war powers, to both the President of the United States and to the Secretary of the Treasury. From this point on in our history, Congress has been mute. That's why Congress is a bunch of bumbling fools, for the most part, in the actions taken by the executive branch. That's why Congress says, we don't have power of the executive. They do, if they would just change this law that they created, but while it's in place, they created a law that says our hands are tied, and therefore they are. The executive commander-in-chief has no limitations if it so chooses. Here's why. The Congressional Act of March 1933, Title I, Section 1, the actions, this is by Congress, the actions, regulations, rules, licenses, orders, and so that's executive orders and proclamations, presidential proclamations, heretofore and here taken after, promulgated, made, or issued by the President of the United States. Remember, that's an office, not a man. Whoever is president has this power. Or the Secretary of the Treasury, which is why everybody's confused about the Federal Reserve and everything else, why it has so much power. Since March the 4th, 1933, pursuant to the authority conferred by Subdivision D of this Section 5 of this Act of October 6, 1977, as amended, are hereby approved and confirmed. The actions, regulations, orders, proclamations, license, everything the President does are hereby approved and confirmed. Why do you have a rogue president? An office of president that the man acts in? Why does the president seem to have unlimited power? Why does the president go and attack all these 50 different countries that we've invaded and bombed that don't even have air forces half the time? Because Congress gave him the power. Then they come and they're like, well, our hands are tied. We can't do anything because the president has executive authority. Why? Because they gave it to him and they pretend they didn't. Now,
actually, Clinton, this goes all the way back to the Constitution. And I think there's an article in the original Constitution where it says, in an emergency measure, the president gets exercise.
Absolutely. That's why I say all constitutions are and have been suspended. That's what the Civil War was. Civil War essentially destroyed the Union and created the corporation. So since March, this is from Senate Report 93-549, which I recommend everybody read. 93-549. Okay? Since March 9th, 1933, the United States has been in a state of declared national emergency. What does that do? That suspends the Constitution. In fact, there are now in effect 4 presidentially proclaimed states of national emergency in addition to the national emergency declared by President Roosevelt in 1933, which is the banking, all that stuff, right? This is, again, 1933 or 1970, I can't remember, 1970 something they wrote this.
I'm just saying, this is just quickly. This is fantastic history. Keep going. People need to know this stuff.
These proclamations give force to 470 provisions of federal law. These hundreds of statutes delegate to the president extraordinary powers extraordinary, meaning not ordinary, something off the charts, outside of the constitutional, bounds, presidential directives and presidential executive orders, which is why you see all these executive orders being done, because Congress can do nothing to stop an executive order. Ordinarily exercised by the Congress. Okay, let me read that again. These hundreds of statutes delegate to the president extraordinary powers, presidential directives, and executive orders ordinarily exercised by the Congress, which affect the lives of American citizens in a host of all-encompassing manners. This vast range of powers taken together confer enough authority to rule the country without reference to normal constitutional processes. Under the powers delegated by these statutes, the president may seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad, institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel, and, they say, in a plethora of particular ways, control the lives of all American citizens. A majority of the people of the United States have lived all their lives, that includes me, born in 1972, we've lived all our lives under emergency rule, it says. We didn't know this because they don't tell us this. For 40 years, this is in 1970-something, freedoms and governmental procedures guaranteed by the Constitution have, in varying degrees, been abridged by the laws brought into force by states of national emergency. Remember, a state of national emergency is a state of war against whatever the declared emergency is. Right? It's the same thing. It's a declaration of war. And the problem with a declaration of war goes by the rule of necessity, and necessity knows no law. Why is this power so important to declare national emergency? Because it gives you lawlessness. Our government is a government right now of lawlessness. We call it civil law. But the truth of the matter is in this report by Congress. In the United States, actions taken by the government in times of great crisis have, from at least the Civil War, in important ways shaped the present phenomenon of a permanent state of national emergency. Folks, you're in a permanent state of war. Okay? War against an emergency. There's not war against a nation. It's not war against a people or there's a war against terrorism, for instance. There's no such thing as a terrorist. That's a word they made up to signify anybody against the United States. And that could be me. That could be you. That's why they call us, what do they call us? Terrorists, insurgents.
Yeah, well, yeah, Clint. Now, with the court ruling, I think this was post 9/11. They got this through, but now anyone who spews anti-government rhetoric, anyone who promotes any sort of conspiracy theory, can be now labeled a domestic terrorist. And I think it was the National Defense Authorization Act revision of 2012, where the U.S. military now can detain any United States citizen and hold them without a trial. Essentially, just put them into a permanent Gitmo style camp.
And why is that? You're already under martial law. You see, the power to declare martial law implies that it's there always. It's just not being invoked. Just like there's a lot of laws that they don't necessarily invoke. They don't, for instance, necessarily arrest an illegal alien, even though it's against the law for an illegal alien to be in this country, right? Good or bad, I don't care. The point is, they're not necessarily invoking a law that is already there. We are already in martial law. They just haven't made it something. They haven't invoked the statutes that cause them to be able to do exactly what you just said. But they can at any time for any person. They don't have to declare martial law on the whole country. They can do it in a city. They can do it in a street. They can do it in a building.
Well, Clint, remember that the Boston bombing? We saw that in full force. They were literally, you look like you literally had an occupied city of Boston. There were thousands of militarized police and Homeland Security was there, FEMA was there, but they were kicking in people's doors. everyone, like no one, I'm pretty sure they raided every single house in the central Boston area immediately after the quote unquote bombing, which that was done by the intelligence agencies, as to provocateur response and put the populace in fear. But just that's a good example. If you haven't seen that, is they literally had the city of Boston completely corded off. That was recent in 2013.
And this goes back to understanding also that when they're declaring martial law, they're declaring the United States is declaring martial law over all the federal areas. They're not doing it over the private areas of the states, other than the fact that the entire thing, the entire geographical area is considered in a certain aspect of the United States, right? But the private areas, they don't care about. They care about the public areas where we all exist. Because remember, we are part of the public domain. We are property. The ultimate ownership of all property is in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government. In other words, the law, amounting to mere user. And the user must be in accordance with the law and subordinate to the necessities of the state. That's Senate document number 4373D, Congress, first session, etc., etc., again from 1933. Under the new law, this is 213, this is again the same congressional record, actually, March 9th, 1933, 73rd Congress. Under the new law, public laws of the 73rd Congress, March 9th, 1933, which is in a very important year, the money is issued.
That's the year Adolf Hitler also rose to power in Nazi Germany.
Absolutely. The whole thing happened all at once. All the revolutionary shit happened all at once. It went from French's Revolution to the American Revolution. All the same people, of course. The money is issued to the Federal Reserve banks in return for government obligations, bills of exchange, drafts, notes, trade acceptances, and bankers' acceptances. The money will be worth 100 cents on the dollar because it is backed by the credit of the nation. It will represent, that is, the money will represent a mortgage on all the homes and other property of all the people, the animals in the nation, the citizens of the nation, not the private people, the citizens of the nation, the goyim, that's us. Again, we don't own anything. All property is where? In the state. The state, in this case, being colloquialism for the district, Washington, D.C. Right? So your money represents the money supply, represents a mortgage, a dead pledge on all the homes and other property of the people of the nation. In other words, we don't own anything. It's all government owned, including our person, our property, our everything. Right? That is why they can declare martial law, because they already own you. They already own everything you think you own that you've registered through the person. They own the person, the status. They own the citizen. You are just surety for it, and therefore you're responsible for it. But everything belongs to government already, so of course they have the power to declare martial law over it. It's a given. See, we don't think that way. That's our problem. We have never considered that none of this is real.
Well, Clint, do you think it is like we have no idea what we're doing when we register? Like you have no idea what you're actually doing when you register your kid with a government birth certificate? I think that's where it all, because I think the word matrix in I think it's Black's Law. Matrix is defined as the drafting of a legal document. And it kind of ties into that word insinuar I mentioned earlier on the show.
The original document.
Exactly. And the birth certificate is the first original document where that's now your new identity. You're stamped with the state approved surname, and I guess now in the law's eyes you're legally a bastard, and that's why, just like we mentioned, like CPS, can now take your kid from you legally, because your kid, it's just the reality. Your kid actually isn't your property. I guess that's a big hurdle for people to
and again, remember what we talked about with property. Yeah, of course your kid is a property of you, and you are a property of God, therefore so is your kid. But what they've done is they've inverted that word, and they've created a legal property, a false artificial they control you by words, as we said. So when you're saying property, no, your child is always your property. But the fact that you've registered and voluntarily handed over your parental rights to the state is why they can do all they want. In other words, you've assigned your child to a person, a status within the United States, which of course is property of the United States. Therefore, they control the property, and you've essentially lynched your kid to that person. That's
to their point, like it's very hard, for one to not live life in this current paradigm without registering. Like think of like the entire U.S. and Canada is basically one big commercial like sea.
Sure,
you have to be completely if you don't register, you're gonna have to be prepared to live life without money, which means you have to go back.
You have to be prepared,
like harvesting your own food and stuff.
You have to be prepared to be born again. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You have to be prepared to literally live in truth. That's all you got to do. Because all these things are artificial. Oh, I'm not going to get my benefit. I'm not going to get my free, health care, my free babysitting because I can't send my child to public school. No man of God in this day and age would send their child to public school. Just go sit in a freaking public school and tell me you want your child in there. Look at what they're teaching. Look at what they're doing to your children. They're turning them against you. And you're going to tell me that it's more important for you to have some time off? So what? You can go work at a bank, being part of the problem, not the solution? Shouldn't you really be putting your kids to work in the fields? I mean, isn't that really the lessons of life they should be learning? How to grow food, how to take care of themselves? Do they need to know every fucking date in history, or do they need to know how to grow a tomato? So you need to decide. This is a part of the choice. You need to decide what's important to you. If having a little time away from your children is more important than having them be free, well, then that's your choice. And you can just continue on the same course that you are. But if you want to make the only choice you can, which is to say, no more, I'm taking my child out of this system that I was unaware that I even put him in, and I'm going to go back to nature. I'm going to be part of the inheritors, those who inherit the earth, and I'm going to, live my own life I'm going to self-govern under the law of God. And then as long as you do no harm to anybody, you're fine. Right? Because this whole system works on you doing everything you do is harm to someone else, something else.
No, so, well said. But just for me, I have an economics degree. I'm still, I'm by no means, out of the system. But I work an under the table job delivering pizzas where I'm paid in cash, for instance. So that's still, I guess I could say I could, with my current qualification, I'm only 23 years old, but I just recently graduated school. But I could join, a big multinational, or some massive, soulless corporation, and I think become, more part of the problem. But I know for me, I'm still, tangled into the web, but I guess unplugging a bit, and because it's just tough, if you are gonna live, in any let's say an apartment building or a house, you have to have money. That's how the system,
I'm not here in any way to judge anybody. Right? I'm not here to say you're bad or good. I'm only telling you this is your choice. It is your choice. Who said life is supposed to be easy? Do you know ease is one of the 7 deadly sins? Right? Life is not supposed to be easy. It is not supposed to be easy for you to just go to a store and get whatever the hell you want from anywhere in the world. That's not how life is. But as long as they can dangle that in front of you and say, well, unless you have our money, you can't participate in our system, which we've created. Okay, well, that's your choice. And that's all I want you to understand. Stop blaming anybody else. Don't blame the Vatican. Don't blame the Jews. Don't blame the Christians. Blame your fucking self, because you're the only one that can make the choice not to participate. And you're the only one that can make the choice to pull your property, your child, that which is a property of you, naturally, not on paper. You're the only one that can make that choice for your child. And your child will grow up in a slave system just like you. That's all I'm saying. I'm not judging you. I'm saying you need to take responsibility that it is you who is making the choice. Okay, you are the hypocrite. You know that you shouldn't be doing this. You know it's against the law of God, and you're still doing it. Accept that. Wear it on your sleeve, or wear it as a cross, like the Catholics do. They wear their sin on their lapel, right? They are sinners. They know it. It's organized crime. Do that. But don't sit here and continue to complain and argue and expose all the evil unless your goal is to get out of the evil. Because trust me, I've been doing this too long, and so much has happened since I started doing this over this 15 years or so that you're not going to change anything. You can't change the system. You can only change yourself. And through your actions, you can be the example, just like Christ. You can be the example for others. But you're never, ever, nothing is ever going to happen unless you make the choice to stop participating in evil. So either accept that and go make your way, join some conglomerate, piece of shit corporation that's going to make you do things against your moral will, or step back for a moment and say, hey, I need a goal. I either want to leave the system or I want to be a part of it. But you can't be a part of God's realm you can't be lukewarm. You can't have 1 foot in and 1 foot out.
Well, I know what's the verse? You can't serve two masters. That's like the famous saying.
Yeah.
Serve God. Like the system is the system of mammon.
Choose between truth. Another word for God is truth. Or lies. Another word for lies is Satan. It's not difficult. But for God's sake, make the choice. Don't sit here like I have for so long thinking that I can get through this by not making a choice. Or by pretending that I can be in both realms. I cannot, and neither can you. And I'm not making this personal. We need to start talking to each other in truth, and this is the truth. The truth is you have to make a choice, and that choice again is coming in a way that I put it in my book. I tried anyway. A way that I can't even put into words. The choice again it's going from an external identity to an internal DNA-based identity. And once that happens, you no longer have the choice. That choice has been taken away from you.
Well, yeah, I'd say, Chip, like, if this happens, Clint, one of the big companies making the RFID chips is McKesson Corporation, and they're also flooding the streets of the United States with dope, getting a lot of people addicted to opiates, and in particular like West Virginia, Kentucky. Their recent CEO, John Hammergren, was educated by I think Jesuits at Xavier. He recently stepped down, but this company is getting like a multi-billions every year. They're on like the U.S. top 100 military contractor list, but they seem to be the driving company behind the RFID technology. But I'd say that if they are successful in making the RFID chips like a mandatory thing, I think at that point it's almost like a game over. Like there's no going back.
Right, but it's not game over unless you accept it.
Yeah, you'd have to. Yeah, like if you accept it. Well, again, and they've started the mental conditioning. I think there's even some American. I think there's a company out in Wisconsin. I know some European companies are doing this. Some companies are saying, hey, if you want to come work here, you got to come put the chip in. And that's why you said it's coming to a point where you're gonna have to make a choice. Like what system do you want to serve? The system of Christ, the system of God, or the system of truth, if you will, or the system that the Vatican Freemasonic Jesuit network has set up. That's it's getting to that point, just with like even with the AI technology making so many groundbreaking breakthroughs every year. Like we're soon going to be like China's already there. Like China has a full social credit system in place already.
Well,
like
okay.
And China's already there. Like at that dystopian state.
You already have the United Nations. We don't have to. I mean, obviously, that United Nations and United States carry a very similar concept, where one corporation rules all states. Well, United Nations is one corporation ruling all nations. And what did Robert Mueller, who was the former Assistant Secretary General, he says we must move as quickly as possible to a one world government, a one world religion under a one world leader. You don't get any clearer than that, and you know who the enemy is. These rogue corporations that are not government or governmental, they are actually the opposite of their administrative states. So, I don't know.
How many times does history have to repeat itself for people to realize that the corporations, are, just evil? During Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler gave Order of the German Eagle to Thomas J. Watson, the CEO of IBM, because IBM enabled the Nazis to keep tabs on all of the inmates in the concentration camps with their up-to-date American computing technology. Just with China, it was American firms that allowed China to build this monstrous, disgusting digital police state. I think there's over 170 million CCTVs in China now. The cops even have facial recognition scanner glasses. But it was Apple, Microsoft, and Google, that enabled China to do this. The examples are boundless. The corporations always invest, to gain and amass more power for themselves.
That's very much here already. It's just being done differently. That whole system of social credit and social identity, social ratings, that kind of thing. Again, to your point, when the Bible says do not respect persons, what's a person? A corporation. The fact that we do not, as a collective body of Christ, go and utterly destroy the Monsanto Corporation, the Bayer Corporation, any corporation that is doing such evil deeds, war corporations, the fact that we aren't destroying, you wouldn't be harming anybody, you'd be harming a bunch of words on paper that form a person, a corporation. The fact that we aren't collectively trying to literally kill these persons, and I mean that in the legal sense, to take away the right of incorporation, the right to be a person in law, to have opinions, to do things under the protection of law that literally harms everybody else in the world, including us. The fact that we're not doing anything about that, when it is the utmost, highest law that we are not to respect persons or flattering titles, presidents of corporations, presidents of governments, which are corporations. The fact that we're not doing anything about that tells you how far we are fallen, that we are already in that system of martial law and Babylon, and we're either going to pull ourselves out or we're not.
Clinton, it's almost like the Jesuits are edging us on to do it, at least with Monsanto. Recently, there was an antitrust case that came up to the Supreme Court against them, and the lawyer was none other than Clarence Thomas, who was a Monsanto lawyer, and this guy was educated at the Jesuit College of the Holy Cross College. He couldn't have picked a better guy to gatekeep it. So
obviously
there should be outrage, out that.
Absolutely, but there's not, and because the media would be that which should cause outrage, but they're not covering any of this. They're not going to cause outrage. They're going to tell you the truth because they're part of it. You're talking about nepotism, right? You're talking about the family. You're talking about the bloodlines that are in control and are in all of these things. They're working together. They own all the corporations. They are the presidents, the vice presidents, the senators. Obama is one of them. He's a white person, believe it or not. He's got a white mother who's part of
his mom Clint worked at the Ford Foundation, which is a CIA, conduit.
Yeah, that's one big happy family that's doing all this to the rest of us. Okay, so again, until that's understood, I don't know what to say. You think Trump is not one of them? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But hey, dude, I got to get going. But,
no, I understand. Just to wrap it up, this is the crux of your work. It's important that we get to the root, understanding of what this system is, rather than get caught up in the branches of the tree. Go right to the root of what the problem is.
Yeah, I mean that's essentially what else can you do? You're basically you got these guys who are going after. I want to learn how to defeat traffic tickets. which is like the lowest possible form of anything you can do. I mean, it's practically worthless to do because, that's like saying I'm going to go deliver newspapers in the Matrix. I'm not doing anything. I'm still in the Matrix. What's the point? I'm barely scraping at the leaves of the tree when I should be going for the root of the tree. And those leaves, I assure you, are perpetual. They will keep growing and growing despite how well you get at defeating traffic tickets, the lowest of the low, right? It is ridiculous to even have that as a goal because unless you just want to make money and be part of the system, well then go ahead. That's your goal. But if your goal is to get out of the system, you better start looking at the root. And look, fiction has no place without a mind to enter. Right? This is a prison for the mind. You the source of all fiction is you. You are responsible because fiction has no power, no nothing unless you believe in it. And as soon as you stop believing, that is loving it, giving it existence by thinking about it and considering it as having power, whether you love it or hate it, then the fiction is always going to, until you stop doing that, then it's always going to have power over you. You are the source of everything. Everything that affects you. Every problem, you are the source. Now, that's not to say there aren't corporations and secret societies that promote the problem, but the problem is your belief that there is such a thing as debt, for instance. There's no debt. There's no money. It has no value.
Yeah, I view it as fictional fiat money. And interestingly, the Chief Justice at the time who signed off on the Federal Reserve Act was Edward Douglas White. This guy had 2 Jesuit degrees and was a member of the Philademic Society. And again, I think it just shows that they're kind of the shadow or the Men in Black, if you will. I actually think the movie Men in Black was an allegory to the Jesuit Freemasonic cabal, aristocratic cabal.
Remember how they funded themselves in Men in Black. They had the patent on Velcro and other things, right? So secretly, but not so secretly, government has the patent on everything. Because the second you file a patent, you're doing so in person, which it owns. Therefore, government has the patent on everything. That's why I say it owns the public domain. See, everything we do, I mean, if you think about it, what is the Patent and Copyright Office but an office to steal all the ideas of the people and make it government?
Well, I think exactly what that is, Clinton. It's really interesting that when the British invaded Washington in the War of 1812, they could have taken out the U.S. Patent Office, but they left it standing. And just that there's a long history of especially during World War II, of you would think they would take out certain targets, but key economic targets are always spared in bombings and missions like this.
Absolutely. It's because it's one big happy family. Well, I mean, let's give you an example. Go look at World War I. What was World War I? It was a economic restructuring of the royal families. All the countries involved in World War I were of the same crown, the same thrones, the same lineage of the Queen of England. Right? It was a family venture, family war. Right? I mean, it's so obvious when you look at it that way.
Well, yeah, I think part of it too, the creation of Saudi Arabia was a direct result of the First World War. And the British, the British and the Americans were intimately involved in that. And just Clinton, I don't know if you know this about Elizabeth, because the Queen of England is a very powerful figure, but I believe Elizabeth is a Dame of Malta, which is a Vatican title, and she was blood related to this guy Andrew Bertie, who was the first Englishman to be the Grand Knight of the Knights of Malta, Andrew Bertie, and he was blood related to Elizabeth. She seems to be the perfect she's an insider. I know she's met the Pope 6 separate times.
All of these titles are again what the Bible says avoid. So how can the Queen of England, which is a flattering title, claim to be Christian and at the same time be bestowing all these flattering titles, which the Bible says never respect flattering titles? none of it makes sense unless you suddenly realize these aren't Christians. These are the Antichrist that are claiming to be Christ. These are the anti-Israelites that are claiming to be Jews or Israelites, right? There's nothing, everything is an inversion. And until that is, again, realized and seen for what it is, we're going to put our faith not in God, but in anti-God. What is designed?
Clint, I'm hoping this is what happens. I'm hoping all these recent sex abuse cases that are coming to the public light will hopefully show people the rotten deviousness that lies at the courts of power.
So the problem there is a whole other subject, which is the reason that the Vatican and I should say the Roman Church and the Mormon Church and the Catholics, and the reason they have so much power as a religious corporation is because they're corporation's soul. So if you really want to know and understand the difference between, say, the Methodist or any other 501c3 church and the Mormons, the Catholics, the Roman Church, the Queen of England is a corporation soul, then you can understand, because a corporation soul is not under the IRS code. It can have all the political intrusions and opinions it wants, whereas all other churches that we belong to are completely silenced by their status, their personhood, because they're corporations, so they have no power in the political realm because they separated the religion from the civil. So that's why religion now is pointless. It's weak. They've got us to join churches that aren't really churches, they're corporations. Whereas in a corporation soul, the church is the people, kind of like the states, the private states are a people. The church is a people, the corporation is not the people. But in the Methodist Church, everything is in the corporation, so there's no religious freedom. But in the Vatican and the Catholics, the Mormons, the church, the corporation soul, is just where they put all their assets as a trust to protect the assets, but the people are separate from the church.
Oh, that's absolutely. And just maybe, I know you got to get going, Clint. If we have another chat, I sent you some of using the knowledge you gave me with going through the CAFR reports. I went through the Archdiocese of Boston CAFR report, and you show in the reports, everything you say about, they say we're a corporation soul, but publicly, the Vatican especially, they do the same trick that all the corporations do by hiding the real nature of the wealth they have by not including their investments on the budget report. So I think it was the Archdiocese of Boston in 2017 said we're 150 million in debt, but when you went through the report, you saw they actually had assets of $900 million.
Well, I spent a couple of years before I understood this structure. I went after the Mormon Church. I'm like, every other church has a financial report. Where is yours? They're we aren't required to put ours up to the public. And I said, bullshit. Every corporation has to, even government. And then I found out it's a corporation soul, and they don't have to. They're immune from most of the IRS laws, and for that matter, a lot of the U.S. laws. So you expect priests to get in trouble, for this. You might be disappointed because what they're acting under is not under the laws of the United States. In a lot of cases.
Yeah, their alliance. It's a foreign, canon law that has nothing to do with.
It's horrifying. Now, this is not to demonize the corporation soul, because it can be used for good, and there's several outlets out there that if you can find the book called The Corporation Soul, about that thick, and read it, it really explains to you how it works, and what all you're really doing is using the inherent rights you already have to be a church, to be an organization without being a legal one. So it's a really fascinating read. And understanding, if you can find it out there, maybe I'll send you a link. But I have to go.
Oh, no worries at all, Clint. Thanks so much for doing this. I saw you sent out the email saying you hadn't had any interviews lately, and I love the work you do. I recommend everyone check out your documentary Corporation Nation, and check out Clint's website, realityblogger.com. WordPress, and I'll try to scope out that Corporation Soul book. And there's a book I just uploaded to archive.org, Clint, that I'll email you that you might like. It goes into church tax exempt statuses. Is a Church Wealth and Business Income by Martin A. Larson. This guy also wrote a book called The Religious Empire, an in-depth look at tax exempt property in the United States. And
it's organized crime. We're a non-profit. You know what? The NFL is non-profit. Can you believe that? NFL non-profit. You know how much money the NFL makes? And it was just unbelievable. But if anyone's listening to this is on the edge, like he's talking about the Bible, what the hell? I hate the Bible. I hate religion. That's why I wrote my book, and you can download it free. It's strawmanstory.info. Website is strawmanstory.info.
Yeah, I did read through it. I'm looking for. I see that a part 2 is coming out. I still have the PDF on my Foxit reader. Yeah, you appreciate that you released that for free for everyone. And just one last point I want to hammer home is just priests and sacerdotal priesthoods like the Jesuits, the Dominicans, and the Franciscans, for instance, and certain Mormon priests may fall into this category also. But the sacerdotal priests are actually exempt from all income tax, and many Jesuits actually serve as bank presidents. Like there was this Chris Lowney, S.J., who is the chief banker for J.P. Morgan. He was the head of their Europe and Asia investment fund as a Jesuit priest. So all the money this Jesuit Chris Lowney was raking in at J.P. Morgan, is completely tax exempt, and that should get people, realizing that there's something profoundly wrong.
And everything they do is for the furtherance of the Catholic hierarchy, the Vatican, it's the world order. That's their purpose. Is everything they do is for the purposes of the church, quote unquote, right? So
actually, Ignatius. I was just saying, Ignatius Loyola the founder of the Jesuits, had the famous quote where he said, I'm paraphrasing it, but it was something on the lines like, if we declare white to be black, it is so. Like, we will make black white, and that's basically the 1984 2 + 2 = 5.
And that's the power assigned to the Pope, is what they will respect. If the Pope says black is white, they will respect it. It's basically what they're saying. So again, the Pope has the power to literally change the laws of nature according to his own doctrine. That's why, that's why it says, follow no false doctrine. Follow the Bible. Do not take religion out of the picture. Look at the Bible as an independent source of law. And all of a sudden it makes perfect sense because it's telling you not to do anything. It doesn't, here's the great thing, man. The Bible's against religion. The Bible's against priests and lawyers and scribes and Pharisees. It's against all these things that we equate to the Bible. Religion always forms around something else, and it's usually in order to use a source of power for ill will. That's my opinion of religion. That's what religion is. Religion comes after the thing which it worships. It doesn't come before. So the Bible came before religions that call the Bible their sacred book. Look to the Bible. This is why the Bible says don't take any other doctrines, laws, in other words. Stick to the Bible. And this is why I wrote the books, to explain what it's telling you and to show you how everything in the Bible is opposed to our system of legal law. It's opposed to Catholicism. It's opposed to Methodism. It's opposed to all these different religions because they have nothing to do with the Bible. They're using it as a structure of power to form a corporation and control people and steer them away from God. Steer them away from their source, nature, and the law of nature. That's the purpose of religion, is to take you away from that sacred object. I mean, I'm sorry, but there's nowhere in the Bible that says, hey, go Catholics or go Methodists. In fact, it says don't take such flattering titles.
Yeah, actually, another part, like there's no mention of any even priests in the Bible, like confessional, like penance, the entire man-made system that the church. And with the confessionals, like the church was basically doing it even better than our modern day county officials are with all the phony fees that they have set up.
And there's no return of Christ. That's the important part. If you're thinking that I could just sit back and let all this evil happen, and just count on Christ returning. No, Christ returns when you start acting Christ-like. That's what the Bible tells you. But it's not going to tell you that in simplistic terms because the king mistranslated it because the king calls himself God. The king is God.
Actually,
So,
Clint, just this would be maybe a good spot to end off because I know you got to go. But just that this photo I've been showing throughout our talk here, this kind of blueprint. Oh, where's my camera? This blueprint of Jesuit control here. This was written by Francis Bacon, and this is a validated history. Francis Bacon was intimately close with King James the First, and Sir Francis Bacon is actually credited as editing the King James Bible. And I found I have a book. I'll send you this book, Clint. It was a biography, but Francis Bacon had his best friend, his alter ego, was a man named Tobias Matthew S.J., and he was a Jesuit. And I thought it was very interesting that Francis Bacon, Bacon himself called him his alter ego. And you can saw in that the photo I just held up there, Bacon. I don't know. I find he seems to be one of the masterminds behind this. He was a highly educated lawyer himself, and was involved in setting up the legal fiction system in England, back in the 1600s. But I'll send you that biography on his Jesuit friend Tobias Matthew. I think you would appreciate that. You're absolutely right, though. There's nothing in the Bible about the entire modern system of religion. Like where in the Bible does it say make sure to give money to your priest, every single week? It's laughable.
The tribulation, the rapture, it's all bullshit. It's all religion. It's not Bible. It's amazing. I mean, I was shocked to actually learn that when I started studying the Bible. There's no rapture. It's like a Hollywood thing.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that the guy who actually invented the rapture was a Jesuit. His name is Manuel Lacunza.
Maybe 1800s, I think.
Yeah, 1800s. Yeah, and so you can see and it's amazing just that you mentioned this in I was reading one of your blog posts recently. You mentioned the Bible is the most freely available book in the world. Even I was visiting my girlfriend in the hospital a few weeks ago. There's 4 Bibles right out there on the table. There's Bibles everywhere, but the key is though they've hidden it in plain sight where even though it's everywhere and accessible, there's a chronic misunderstanding of it.
And there's a reason for that. It's because they cannot claim that their law stands unless you are given every possible opportunity to learn what the law is. And if you don't read the Bible, you don't know the basis of law. Therefore, you can't possibly know that everything you do is fraud or against the foundation of all law. So, yeah, of course they provide you the English translation of the Bible, even though the Catholic Church, up until just recently, and they still do for the most part, they still read everything in Latin. Latin's considered a dead language, pretty much. Because they don't want you to know what's in the Bible. They don't want you to know, they created this prosperity preaching and all this evangelism, all this crap, because they don't want you to know what's in the Bible, because if you knew, you couldn't be enslaved. It's that simple. So yeah, they're all over the place. You have access to it in every possible way. Most sold book in the world, and yet nobody freaking knows. It's like you put it as furniture on your bookcase, right? I've got the Bible, therefore I know the Bible. I've read the Bible in English, therefore I know it. I guarantee if you've read the Bible 10 times over, you do not know what the Bible says unless you've gone back to the Greek, the Chaldean, the lexicons for all the Hebrew and the Latin and everything else. You have no idea what the Bible says because you think the word God means God when it actually means a king.
And Clinton, this is why I think the Jesuits have co-opted there's so many evangelical preachers, there's so many just false prophets out there nowadays, preaching a phony gospel, and that's the reason. So people aren't actually going to the book itself and reading it; they're getting it filtered to them by a co-opted pastor, and they're just everywhere.
It's horrible.
and all the even like and how it gets crazy. Like you can see article after article of like what evangelists like a big evangelicist, make sure I'm saying that right, flies off in a private jet. Like it happens all the time. Like, I was just reading an article that it was a Catholic priest in Kenya flew off in a private jet while his parishioners were starving. Like it's just I don't know, the information is out there. That's what I'm saying. It's people. It's your responsibility to know this stuff, especially in today's information age. You know, like Clint's website is just a mountain of information. Even like my blog, for a research, Johnny Cerrucci, a researcher I work with, he's got a ton of stuff on his website. The archive.org website alone probably has 50 billion entries on it. Like there's so much information out there. It's almost overwhelming if you have an internet connection. I guess if you don't have internet, that's a valid excuse. But I'd say just at this time, there's no excuse for us not to know what the truth is.
To an extent, because the Bible also says, hey, we're going to be destroyed by knowledge. My people are destroyed by a lack of knowledge of truth. But it also says we'll be destroyed by knowledge, which really means information. Information is not knowledge. Information in form, right? So really, there's all kinds of false information. And you have to be really careful not to lose track of true knowledge while digging into the shit we're talking about, with these institutions of these lies, basically. Because once you cross over to the point where you forget that you're supposed to be over here in true knowledge, you're over here in information, which is all man-made. Don't ever lose yourself in the man-made when you're part of God, because you will be destroyed not only by your lack of knowledge of truth, but by the knowledge you've obtained of information, of false knowledge.
Well, I'm saying a way that could affect your own life is you can overwhelm yourself with this type of information, where then I've done that. I've become unbalanced in the past.
Yes.
I'm spending way too much time researching this stuff, and it's just ultimately it's just a cycle of information, and you kind of lose track of like the core self of who you are. I am who that I am.
That's why I say, what's your goal? Because if your goal is not to leave the matrix, there's no use trying to figure out how it works. You're already in it. You're going to stay in it. Just use it for what it is, a place that enslaves you and that you can make profit in mammon, right? But if your goal is to leave it, well, then it'll guide your research in ways that will affect that change in yourself. And like I said, you're not going to help anybody until you yourself gets out and changes, right?
Well, I was saying, maybe this is a good way to end. I know you're saying you have to go, but it's the old. I don't know who coined the saying, but to change the world, you have to change yourself. Like it really is a true statement. What happens is the causes though is just on the macro scale, we all need to change our behavior. That's ultimately how the change will take off. It has to be a collective effort. Like one person just making the videos or making a blog isn't gonna do anything. It has to be, I would say, at least 75% of the populace needs to become mobilized.
It can't be collective if it's first, not individual, right? Those people who made those quotes, they were individuals. They were original thinkers. And we have to become original thinkers, not doing things the same old way and expecting different results. That's craziness. So, before you can have a social change, there has to be an example. Because right now, everybody says the same thing. What do I do? Am I going to have to live on mountain berries and bark? Am I going to have to live in the wild? Am I going to have to do it? Because there's no example for us to follow except the story of Jesus Christ, and we can't picture that. We don't understand that where Jesus walked is nature. It doesn't matter how, if you're walking in Chicago, as we call it, which is a legal fiction, a person in law, that doesn't mean I'm in Chicago. If I'm not a municipal citizen of either the United States, Chicago, the state it's in, right? I'm not in Chicago unless I agree that I'm in Chicago. You see, that's the difference between the typical person and Jesus is that Jesus could walk in Chicago and still be in nature because he doesn't believe that Chicago exists. He doesn't have respect for any of the names, titles, flattering titles, or authorities that represent Chicago. It's God's realm. Just because you've covered it up with a bunch of concrete and shit doesn't change the fact that it's God's kingdom, not man's. That's the mindset.
No, absolutely. Like if people, I think this mindset should also be applied towards all religions and just government in particular. We need to stop believing in that feudalism, is not legitimate whatsoever. And like people, need to stop legitimizing it in their minds. Like for the Pope, like the Pope calls himself God, like that's outrageous. The Pope is not a god. The Pope, if he jumped off a 20-story building, is gonna snap both of his legs just like any other ordinary, human. He is not a god. So you know what I mean. So like people's got to get out of that mindset. The Pope has to brush his teeth. He does. He's a normal person. You know what I mean? Like that's the mindset people need to get out. He's not a god. So that's a ludicrous claim, and people need to stop respecting it. Just like it's ludicrous that the U.S. government and all governments view their citizens as chattel slaves. It's a ludicrous, idea that has no place in nature. As you said, it's a man-made system of control, which shouldn't be respected. So it looks like I don't know if Clint's audio went out there. But I'll mention the book here. And this was the Organic Act. I recommend people read through this. Me and Clint were discussing this earlier in the stream. The book that I want people to I think it's a very educational book. I'd recommend this book to anyone. I'll just show you it here. But it shows that all churches in the United States, in particular all the Catholic churches and sacerdotal priesthoods, are completely exempt from the IRS tax code, church wealth, and business income. And I'll send this book. I'll email you this book, Clint. And it looks like Clint. Laid out there. But yeah, I'll try to get another stream going with Clint. Hope you guys enjoyed this. I enjoyed the chat with Clint. And I do got to get going here. But peace and love, everyone. And I'll catch you on the next one. God bless.